Imagine waking up one day and realizing that everything you've ever known, your family, your home, your job, even your own body, might not be real. Instead, you might be a brain sitting in a vat of life-supporting fluid, hooked up to a computer. That computer feeds you signals. These signals tell your brain what to feel, see, hear, and touch. They give you the experience of living in a world that doesn't exist. This idea is called the Brain-in-a-Vat Hypothesis. It might sound like science fiction, but it's a real thought experiment that asks serious questions about knowledge, perception, and reality. Let's walk through how this works. The basic setup is this. Imagine a scientist removes your brain from your skull without damaging it. She places it in a vat filled with a special fluid that keeps it alive. Then, she connects your brain to a powerful computer using wires and sensors. These wires send electrical impulses to your brain. The signals mimic the ones your brain normally gets from your senses. So, even though you're not seeing a sunset or holding a cup of coffee, the computer tells your brain that you are. And because your brain responds only to electrical signals, it believes what it's told. To you, nothing feels different. The sky still looks blue. The coffee still tastes bitter. Your fingers still feel warm as they wrap around the cup. But all of it is fake. The computer generates every detail. You have no body. There is no sky. The cup doesn't exist. You are just a brain floating in a vat. Yet everything seems normal. This scenario raises a big question. If everything we experience comes through our senses, how can we know that those senses tell us the truth? In real life, our brains already rely on input from the outside world. Light enters our eyes, sound enters our ears. We touch, taste, and smell things. All of this data becomes nerve signals. Our brain processes them and builds a picture of the world. But what if the source of that data isn't the world at all? What if the source is something else, like a computer? You might wonder, isn't this a little extreme? In a way, yes, but it isn't meant to describe a likely situation. It's a way to ask, what do we really know, and how do we know it? It's a tool to think about the limits of knowledge. In philosophy, people use cases like this to push boundaries and test beliefs. Take a simple example. Imagine you're sitting at a table. You look down and see your hands. You feel the weight of your arms. You wiggle your fingers. You think, I know these are my hands. But the brain-in-a-vat idea says, maybe the computer just made you think that. Maybe the visual image, the sense of movement, and even the thought itself are all simulations. Maybe there are no hands at all. Maybe there's no table. Maybe you're just a brain floating in fluid, thinking you see a table. It feels strange because we trust our senses. We assume that what we see is real. But think about dreams. In dreams, things seem real too. You might fly or talk to someone who died years ago. You might taste food or feel pain. But when you wake up, you realize none of it happened. Your brain made it up. The brain-in-a-vat idea suggests this might be happening all the time, not just when we sleep. Now let's take this one step further. Think about computers today. They can create entire worlds, video games, virtual reality, CGI, and movies. Some games feel lifelike. They have sound, motion, touch. What happens as technology improves? One day, we might build simulations so advanced that we can't tell the difference between real and fake. If we get to that point, then how can we be sure we're not already in such a simulation? This thought connects the brain-in-a-vat idea to what some people call the simulation hypothesis. This idea says that we might be living in a computer program created by someone else, maybe a future civilization or an advanced form of intelligence. If they can run many simulations, then it becomes likely that we're inside one of them. After all, there could be billions of simulated people and only a few real ones. But the brain-in-a-vat scenario doesn't need future tech. It only asks, what if our sense of reality depends entirely on signals? If that's true, then the source of those signals could be anything. It could be the real world, it could be a dream, it could be a machine. Let's make it personal. Imagine your life for a moment. Think about where you are, who you love, what you believe. Now imagine a scientist designed all of it, every detail, every moment, every memory. She typed it into a computer and fed it to your brain. Could you tell the difference? Would you even suspect it? What evidence could prove you're not a brain in a vat? Here's where the problem deepens. Anytime you try to test your world, you use your senses. But if those senses are already controlled by the computer, then your test results might be false too. You could look in a mirror, feel the ground, run experiments. But if the signals are fake, then the answers will be fake as well. So you can't prove or disprove the idea. It traps you. Some philosophers argue that if something can't be proven or disproven, we shouldn't worry about it. They say, if we can't escape the vat, then we should treat our experience as real. But others think the question still matters. It forces us to think hard about the nature of truth. It shows how much we take for granted. Imagine another example. A person named Alex lives a full life. She grows up, studies, works, makes friends. She feels joy, sorrow, boredom, excitement. Then one day she learns that she's just a brain in a vat. Her whole life has been a simulation. She didn't really walk on a beach or eat ice cream or laugh with her best friend. Does that change what her life meant? Does it make her feelings less real? That's one more reason people explore this idea. It touches on more than science or philosophy. It touches on meaning. You might ask, if I can't ever know the truth, why think about this at all? But that's part of the point. The brain-in-a-vat idea challenges you to ask deeper questions. It doesn't give answers. It invites you to think. How much of your life do you accept without question? How do you define real? What would count as proof? Even though the idea is just a thought experiment, it creates space to reflect, not just on science or knowledge, but on experience itself. It asks you to step back and look at the world, not as something you assume to be real, but as something you must learn to question. And in doing that, it sharpens how you think, not just about what's real, but about who you are. Flat Earth theory is the belief that the Earth is flat rather than a round sphere. This idea goes against what scientists have agreed on for centuries. Still, some people believe it. They argue that what we've been taught about Earth's shape is wrong. They question pictures from space, airplane flight paths, and even how the horizon looks to the naked eye. They think that the Earth looks flat, so it must be flat. People have thought the Earth was round for more than 2,000 years. In ancient Greece, a man named Eratosthenes showed that the Earth was round by looking at shadows. In one city, a stick cast no shadow at noon. In another city, at the same time, the stick cast a long shadow. He realized that could only happen if the Earth was curved. He even used math to estimate the Earth's size, and he came very close to the real number. He didn't have a telescope. He didn't fly in a plane. He just watched shadows and thought carefully. Modern science uses many tools to confirm what Eratosthenes guessed. Satellites circle the Earth. They take pictures that show the Earth as round. Astronauts go into space and see the curved horizon. Planes fly across the globe and follow curved paths to save time and fuel. GPS systems rely on a network of satellites. That system would not work on a flat Earth. Flat Earth supporters don't accept this evidence. They say the images from space are fake. They believe the space agencies lie. They think satellites don't exist or don't work the way we're told. Instead of accepting the globe, they describe a flat disk. In their model, the North Pole sits at the center. The continents spread out around it. Antarctica forms a wall of ice around the edge. They say this ice wall keeps the oceans from spilling off. This model causes problems. For one, it cannot explain how people travel around the world. If the Earth were a flat disk, pilots flying in a straight line would hit the ice wall or take strange paths. But we know that ships and planes can go in one direction and end up where they started. That only makes sense if the Earth is a sphere. The flat Earth model also fails to explain how the sun behaves. On a globe, the sun lights different parts of the Earth as it moves. This explains why it's day in some places and night in others. It explains why the seasons change. On a flat Earth, the sun would need to circle above the disk like a spotlight, but that doesn't match what we see. The sun doesn't fade out into the distance. It sinks below the horizon. It looks like it sets. That only makes sense on a round planet. People who believe in a flat Earth often use personal observation. They say, when I look at the ocean, it looks flat. Or they ask, if the Earth curves, why don't I see the curve? The answer lies in scale. The Earth is very large. The curve is too gradual to notice from the ground, but it becomes clear from higher up. If you go high in a plane, you can sometimes see the curve. Astronauts in orbit see it clearly. Another question they ask is about water. They say, Water finds its level. How can water curve? But water doesn't stay flat when you look at large bodies like oceans. Gravity pulls everything toward the center of the Earth. That force shapes oceans and lakes into curved surfaces. It may not be visible at a small scale, but over long distances, the curve adds up. Flat Earth theory also struggles with star patterns. In the northern part of the Earth, people see one set of stars. In the southern part, they see different ones. On a round Earth, this makes sense. People at different points on a sphere face different directions in space. On a flat Earth, everyone should see the same sky, but they don't. The theory also fails with lunar eclipses. During an eclipse, the Earth blocks the sun's light and casts a shadow on the moon. That shadow is always round. If the Earth were flat, the shadow would look different depending on the angle, but the shadow is always a circle. Only a sphere casts a round shadow from every angle. Science depends on evidence. It builds on observation, testing, and repeated results. Flat Earth theory ignores that. Instead, it relies on doubt and disbelief. It picks apart details without offering working alternatives. It doesn't explain how satellites function, how GPS works, or why the seasons shift. It cannot explain tides, moon phases, or how people in Australia see different constellations than people in Europe. People often come to Flat Earth theory because they distrust large systems. They believe governments or space agencies hide the truth. They think science is controlled or dishonest. This distrust leads them to search for different answers. In doing that, they look for gaps or weak points in accepted models. But finding a gap doesn't prove a new theory. It only raises questions. To replace the round Earth, Flat Earth theory must do more than doubt. It must build a model that matches reality and passes tests. It must explain gravity, orbits, time zones, satellite motion, and eclipses. So far, it has not done that. The round Earth model explains all these things clearly. It fits the facts. It matches what we see in space. It works in practice, from space travel to everyday GPS use. Still, the idea of a flat Earth won't go away easily. Some people feel ignored or dismissed. They turn to Flat Earth groups for community. They share videos and debates online. They feel part of something important. This belief system grows not because it works, but because it gives people a sense of control. It lets them say, "I see the truth for myself." That's powerful, even if it's based on error. If you stand on a beach and look out, the world may seem flat, but what seems true isn't always the same as what is true. Science uses tools to look deeper. Telescopes, satellites, and math reveal a bigger picture. The Earth is round. We've known it for a long time. And we know it not because someone told us, but because we can test it, measure it, and see it for ourselves, if we're willing to look. You sit in a quiet room and look at a candle. The flame flickers. You don't touch it. You don't blow on it. You don't move the air. But just by looking at it, something changes. Not the candle itself, but something deeper, the way we understand its behavior. This is the heart of the observer effect. The idea that watching something can change what it does. People often hear about this in physics. They hear that in the tiny world of atoms and particles, observation changes outcomes. But it's not just a strange rule of quantum science. It happens in regular life too. The observer effect shows up when you watch people, measure behavior, or try to track anything in motion. Start with a basic science example. In physics, if you want to know where a particle is, you have to detect it. That means shining light on it or bouncing another particle off it. But when you do that, you change its motion. The act of measuring its position gives it a little push. Now it's not in the same place anymore. You needed to look, but the look made it move. This is why some scientists say you can't know both the position and speed of a particle at the same time with perfect accuracy. When you measure one, the other changes. This isn't because tools aren't good enough. It's a built-in part of how the world works at small scales. This is called Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. It says that the more closely you look at one detail, the more other details blur. But you don't need physics to see how observing can change things. Think about a classroom. A teacher walks in and stands at the front. Students stop whispering. They sit up. Some open books. They change their behavior because they know someone is watching. Now imagine the teacher hides a camera in the back of the room. The same thing happens. Once students know they're being recorded, they act differently. They don't behave the same as they would alone. Or think about animals. A scientist wants to study birds in the wild. If she walks too close, they fly away. If she stays hidden, she may not disturb them. But even hidden, her presence affects things. Her smell, her movement, her sounds in the grass, all of it may change how the birds act. The moment she tries to watch, she becomes part of the scene. Even in hospitals, this effect shows up. A patient may act differently when a doctor walks in. Their heart rate might go up. Their voice might shake. A nurse taking blood pressure might change the result just by being there. Stress from being observed can cause small shifts. These shifts change the data. Some people confuse the observer effect with simple interference. But it's not always that someone bumps into a system. It's about how observation and measurement work. In some cases, you can't avoid it. You must touch a thing to know more about it. You must shine light to see. You must ask a question to get an answer. And in doing so, you push or pull the system, even a little. Take another example from social science. Researchers want to study how people shop in a grocery store. If they send someone with a clipboard to follow shoppers, people pick items they wouldn't normally choose. They act more carefully. They pause longer. They feel judged. That small presence, a person with a notepad, alters natural behavior. The data isn't fake. It's just not what would have happened without the observer. There are ways to reduce this. Researchers use hidden cameras, long-distance microphones, or anonymized tracking. But even the knowledge that one might be watched can change behavior. People don't always need to see the observer. They just need to believe the observer is there. Even in digital systems, the observer effect appears. When you monitor a computer network to see how it performs, the act of monitoring can slow it down. The software that checks the system takes up memory. It uses processing power. So the system you're studying changes under the load of being studied. This isn't just a trick of electronics or biology. The observer effect touches human thought. Imagine a person who starts a journal to write down their feelings. Just the act of writing changes how they see those feelings. They pause to think. They shape their thoughts into sentences. That reflection, the process of observing their own emotions, alters what those emotions mean. The same happens in therapy. A person speaks their thoughts aloud and hears them in a new way. That changes their view of themselves. Or think about a person taking a test. A camera points at them. They sit under bright lights. They know someone is watching. Even if they studied hard, they may feel pressure. That pressure affects memory, attention, and how fast they think. Their score reflects not just what they know, but how they respond to being observed. In workplaces, the observer effect shapes performance. Managers know this. They call it management by walking around. When the boss shows up on the floor, workers tend to focus more. They follow safety rules. They stop chatting. The manager's presence changes the moment. There's a name for a similar idea, the Hawthorne effect. In the 1920s, researchers studied factory workers at the Hawthorne Works. They wanted to see if lighting changes would affect productivity. They found that when they observed the workers, output increased. But it didn't seem to matter how they changed the lights. What mattered was the attention. The workers knew they were part of a study. That awareness improved their focus for a while. The observation itself was the factor. Now consider how this works in law enforcement. When people know they're on camera, like with police body cams or street surveillance, they may act differently. This can reduce crime or change how people respond to police. Again, it's not just about being watched, but knowing you're being watched. Even parenting shows a version of this. A child left alone with toys behaves one way. A child whose parent watches from the doorway behaves another way. The observer, quiet, even unseen, has influence. This doesn't mean we should stop observing. We need measurement. We need study. But we also need to understand that the act of watching is not neutral. It often leaves a fingerprint. The systems we observe, particles, people, animals, even machines, do not exist in a sealed state. They respond to attention. The observer effect isn't a trick or an error. It's a reminder. When we seek knowledge, we must take care. The tools we use, the ways we look, the presence we bring, all these can shift the result. Sometimes only slightly, sometimes a lot. But always, in some way, they become part of the story. Picture this. You wake up and everything feels normal. You remember your name. You remember yesterday. You feel the air on your skin. You look around the room and see a bed, a chair, and a cup of water on the table. It all seems solid and familiar. But now imagine none of it is real. You weren't born. You didn't grow up. Your memories are false. The chair, the room, the cup, all of it formed by chance a moment ago and will vanish just as fast. You are a Boltzmann brain. This idea comes from physics. It began with a scientist named Ludwig Boltzmann, who studied how atoms behave. He worked with something called entropy, which is a way to talk about disorder. A broken cup has more entropy than a clean one. A messy room has more entropy than a tidy one. Over time, the universe moves from low entropy to high entropy. In other words, things go from order to disorder. Ice melts, stars burn out, and things fall apart. But Boltzmann asked a question. If the universe tends toward disorder, how did it start in such an ordered state? One idea is that order can appear by chance. If you wait long enough, atoms might randomly fall into place and form something organized, like letters in a bowl of alphabet soup spelling out a sentence. It's unlikely, but not impossible. In an infinite amount of time, unlikely things will happen. Now apply that to the universe. Imagine the universe is endless and lasts forever. In all that time, most of it will be a dark, empty space filled with random particles. But once in a great while, those particles could bump together in just the right way to form something strange. Maybe a planet, maybe a galaxy, or maybe a single brain, a brain with thoughts, memories, and a sense of self. That's a Boltzmann brain. The Boltzmann brain wouldn't have a body. It wouldn't live in a world like ours, but it would feel like it did. It would remember a life it never lived. It would think it had parents, friends, and a history. It would feel like it was sitting in a room, drinking coffee, or walking outside. But none of that would be true. The brain would just pop into existence with all of that already inside. And then, in the next moment, it would dissolve. This sounds like a nightmare, but it's not meant to scare. It's a way to ask a question. What is more likely? A huge, complex universe like the one we live in? Or one simple brain that only thinks it lives in such a universe? Think about how rare our universe seems. It has stars, galaxies, planets, and life. It follows rules that allow things like chemistry and biology. It had a low entropy beginning. If that beginning came from chance, the odds are very small. On the other hand, the odds of one brain appearing with fake memories are still small, but much smaller than building an entire universe. So if the universe is random and eternal, the appearance of a Boltzmann brain might be more likely than a full world like ours. That leads to a strange idea. If Boltzmann brains are more common than full universes, then maybe you are a Boltzmann brain. Maybe the world you see is part of the illusion. Maybe your memories don't reflect anything real. You didn't walk the dog yesterday. You didn't eat breakfast. Those memories came into being just now, along with your thoughts and the feeling of being alive. Let's explore this further. Imagine flipping a coin 1,000,000 times. Getting all heads is almost impossible. But if you flip coins forever, you'll get that result eventually. Now imagine the universe rolling dice again and again. Most rolls lead to chaos. But once in a while, the dice come up in a way that builds order. A galaxy, a solar system, or maybe just one brain with a short life. A Boltzmann brain is that rare roll of the dice. It comes into being by accident, not by design. It doesn't grow from a baby or age with time. It's like a flash in the dark, a brief moment of false awareness that ends before it begins. Some physicists see this as a problem. If our best theories say that Boltzmann brains are more likely than full humans in a real world, then the theory might be flawed. A good theory should make sense of what we observe, and what we observe is a stable, long-lasting world, not a brief illusion. If a theory leads to the idea that we're more likely to be Boltzmann brains, then it might not match the reality we experience. Others say we can't rule it out. Maybe the world only seems stable. Maybe your life is part of the short flicker of thought inside a brain that will soon vanish. That brain might never sense the truth before it disappears. To that brain, it feels like life is real. Think about dreams. In a dream, things seem real. You might fly, talk to people, or drive a car. While you're dreaming, you don't question it. Only when you wake up do you realize it wasn't true. A Boltzmann brain never gets to wake up. It dreams for a moment, then stops. This leads to a hard question. How do you know you're not one? You can't check. Every test you try to run happens inside the illusion. Every fact you think you know could be part of the false memory. You feel real, but so would a Boltzmann brain. You remember your life, but those memories could be part of the accident that made you. The test tube in which your mind floats might not even exist. We usually trust experience. We believe what we see and feel. But this thought experiment shows that experience alone might not be enough. If a brain can appear by chance with fake memories and false senses, then what counts as proof? You could argue that this doesn't matter. If you feel alive, think thoughts, and make choices, then your experience is still valid, even if you're a Boltzmann brain. But that view doesn't help answer the original question. What is the source of your reality? Is it a long history shaped by evolution and stars? Or is it one moment of order in a sea of disorder? The Boltzmann brain idea presses on a deeper issue. It challenges how we understand truth. It asks if order must come from a long, slow process, or if it can pop into existence in a flash. It makes us rethink what counts as real and what might just feel real for a second before it all fades away. The Great Reset is a term that has been used in many ways. Some people see it as a plan to improve the world after the COVID-19 pandemic. Others believe it hides a deeper, more secret agenda. In those circles, the Great Reset becomes a conspiracy theory. The idea is that powerful people want to change the global economy and society in ways that take away freedom, increase control, and reshape how people live and work. This belief has grown online and has spread across different political groups and countries. The phrase, the Great Reset, started with the World Economic Forum. That's a group that brings together business leaders, politicians, and academics. In 2020, during the pandemic, they used the phrase to suggest rebuilding the global economy to be more fair and sustainable. They talked about things like reducing pollution, fixing supply chains, improving public health, and addressing economic inequality. It was a broad and idealistic proposal, not a clear step-by-step plan. But some people saw something more in the idea. They began to say that the Great Reset was not just about rebuilding. They claimed it was a plot. According to this theory, a small group of elites want to use a crisis, like the pandemic, to gain more power. These elites might include wealthy business leaders, global organizations, and government officials. The claim is that they want to create a new kind of society where they control land, money, technology, and even how people live their daily lives. A popular version of this theory says the end goal is a world where individuals own nothing. Instead, they would rent or borrow everything from big companies or the government. Supporters of the theory often point to a slogan that appeared in a World Economic Forum video: "You'll own nothing, and you'll be happy." Critics use that line to say that the real plan is to remove private ownership, especially among ordinary people. Imagine someone living in a small town who owns a car, a house, and tools to fix things. Under this theory, that person fears a future where they no longer own those items. Instead, they would need to subscribe to a car service, rent their home from a company, and borrow tools through an app. This shift might seem convenient to some, but to others, it signals a loss of independence. Another part of the theory focuses on digital tracking. Some believe that the Great Reset includes building systems to monitor people's actions, what they buy, where they go, and who they meet. The concern is that digital currency, health passports, and online IDs could give governments and corporations too much control. In this view, a person might be denied access to services based on their behavior, beliefs, or spending habits. Think about a digital wallet that holds your money, ID, medical records, and travel history. That wallet could be turned off or restricted if a person breaks certain rules or disagrees with official policies. That level of control would change how people live and interact. For someone who believes in the theory, this isn't just a possibility. It's a key part of what the Great Reset will bring. The theory also includes fears about forced changes in diet, travel, and energy use. Some say people will be told to stop eating meat to avoid long trips and to use only certain types of power. These changes are often connected to concerns about climate change. Supporters of the theory argue that while protecting the planet sounds good, it can become a reason to limit personal freedom. One example often used is the push for smart cities. These are urban areas that use sensors, cameras, and data to run more efficiently. Supporters of the theory say smart cities might monitor trash, electricity, and even bathroom use. That sounds extreme, but the idea is that constant tracking creates a life where privacy becomes impossible. A person could be watched not just by law enforcement, but also by private companies that collect data for profit or control. Some versions of the theory tie the Great Reset to older fears. These include ideas about a one-world government or secret groups that plan world events. In these views, the pandemic was not just a health crisis, but a planned event to justify massive change. People point to lockdowns, vaccine requirements, and business closures as early signs of a shift toward a more controlled society. It's important to see how this kind of thinking spreads. A person might start by reading a blog or watching a video. The story might mix facts with guesses. Maybe it quotes real speeches from leaders but adds extra meaning. Over time, the reader sees patterns that may not be there. They connect unrelated events, a supply chain delay, a new law, a shift in housing policy, and fit them into a larger story. This story can feel true because it offers a simple answer to complex problems. The world is confusing. Prices rise, jobs change, technology moves fast. It's hard to keep up. A theory like the Great Reset gives a clear enemy, them, the people in charge. It says, you're not imagining things, they're doing this on purpose. That message is powerful. It can create fear and anger. It can also bring people together who feel left out or unheard. But the danger is that it turns every public plan into a secret plot. A new health policy, part of the Great Reset. A new tax, part of the plan. A new tech product, a way to control you. Soon, nothing is just what it seems. Not all critics of the Great Reset believe in the full theory. Some raise valid points. They worry that large meetings of business and political leaders happen behind closed doors. They ask whether global plans respect local voices. They question who benefits when big systems change. These are fair questions, but they don't prove a hidden agenda. Others point out that many parts of the Great Reset, like ending poverty, reducing emissions, or improving healthcare, are common goals. These ideas appear in political speeches and international agreements. They can be debated and voted on. But conspiracy versions of the theory treat these ideas as lies that cover up a darker truth. For someone who believes in the theory, evidence to the contrary often makes no difference. If a leader says that's not true, the believer might say, of course they'd deny it. This way of thinking makes the theory hard to test or disprove. In everyday life, most people won't see signs of a global reset. They'll go to work, buy food, and talk to friends. But the theory lives on in forums, videos, and protests. It shapes how people see the world. It creates mistrust of government, media, and science. Whether true or not, it changes how people act and what they believe. And that gives it power, even without proof. Imagine sitting alone in a quiet room. You think about your day, your thoughts, your feelings. You hear sounds outside the window. You see the walls, the floor, your own hands. Everything feels real. But what if all of it, every sound, every object, every person you've ever known only exists in your mind? That's the heart of cosmic solipsism. It's the idea that your consciousness is the only thing that truly exists. Everything else could be a projection, a dream, or a story created by your own awareness. Solipsism isn't about the universe being fake, like a trick or illusion set up by someone else. It's about not being able to prove anything exists outside your own thoughts. You know you exist because you can think. You feel things. You wonder. You make choices. That part is clear. But what about the rest of the world? What about other people, places, and events? You experience them through your senses. You see people. You hear voices. You read books. But all of that could happen inside your own mind. Think about a dream. While you sleep, your brain builds entire worlds. You see streets, houses, skies, animals, and people. You feel fear, joy, pain, and surprise. All of it seems real at the time. But when you wake up, you know it was just your brain at work. You were the only real thing in that dream. Everything else was a creation. Cosmic solipsism asks whether waking life could be the same. Take a simple example. You talk with a friend. They tell you a story about their job. You laugh. They laugh back. You feel close to them. But all you really know is that your brain has produced that experience. You heard their voice, you saw their face. But what proof do you have that they have a mind like yours? You can't hear their thoughts. You only see what your senses provide. It could be your own consciousness imagining everything, your friend, the story, the laughter. This idea can go further. Maybe the stars, the oceans, and all of history only exist because your consciousness creates them. Maybe the past you remember is just a memory made for you, not a record of real events. Maybe every book you've read, every video you've watched, and every lesson you've learned came from your mind, not from other people. Some people find this idea hard to accept. They point to science, facts, and shared experience. But none of those things escape the filter of your own mind. You read about the moon landing. You see photos of Earth from space. You trust the accounts of astronauts and scientists. But all of that reaches you through words, images, and ideas, things your consciousness experiences. You never touch the moon. You never meet the people who went there. It's all secondhand, and that leaves room for doubt. Now think about other people's minds. You see people make choices. You see them act with purpose. You guess what they feel based on what they say or do. But you never feel their pain, hear their thoughts, or see through their eyes. You assume they are conscious because they act like you do. But that's still an assumption. They could be part of the experience created for your benefit. Consider an example from daily life. You walk into a store and see a clerk behind the counter. They greet you. You respond. The exchange feels real. But if your consciousness is the only real thing, then the clerk might not exist beyond that moment. Once you leave the store, they could vanish like a figure in a dream. You remember the interaction, but that memory is also part of your mind. Another example might be a phone call. You speak to someone who tells you they're in another city. They describe the weather, their plans, their life. You believe them because the conversation feels normal. But what if the entire call is a creation of your own mind? The voice on the line, the story, even the feeling of connection, all made by you, for you. Cosmic solipsism also challenges time and space. You think the world has a history. You believe it stretches far back before you were born. But what if all of that history only exists as part of your current experience? You remember school, your childhood, your parents' lives. But those memories might not point to real events. They might be placed in your mind as background, like setting details in a novel. You believe in ancient history, in the age of dinosaurs or the rise of empires, but you've never lived through those times. You've only heard stories and seen images, all of which come to you through the senses. Again, things your consciousness interprets. Even physical laws could be part of this. You believe gravity pulls you down because you feel it. You see objects fall. But these rules work inside your experience. You don't know if they apply outside your mind. If nothing exists outside your mind, then the laws of physics are just how things behave within the mind you have. This doesn't mean that things aren't consistent. You still see the sun rise each day. You still drop a ball and watch it fall. But if all those things happen within your consciousness, consistency only proves the mind's ability to hold patterns. A dream can be consistent too. You can dream of the same place many times. You can even remember things in dreams from earlier dreams. That doesn't make them real in the outside sense. Imagine a storybook where you are the only character who can think. Everyone else talks and moves, but they follow a script. You can feel, change your mind, make choices. The others cannot. You can't be sure they have minds. You only know your own. That's the problem solipsism puts in front of you. It removes certainty about everything except your own awareness. Cosmic solipsism takes this to a wider scale. It doesn't just say, maybe other people don't have minds. It says, maybe the entire universe exists only in your mind. You're not a person inside the universe. The universe is inside your awareness. The stars, the planets, the forests, and the cities, none of them need to be out there. They might only exist as part of what your mind creates or receives. This doesn't mean the world feels less real. You still have pain when you're hurt. You still feel joy when you laugh. You still cry when something ends. All those feelings are real to you. In solipsism, that's all that can ever be real, what you experience. You can't step outside yourself to check. You can't visit another consciousness to compare notes. You might try to prove that others exist. You might ask questions, argue, or wait for someone to surprise you. But even then, it all happens within your mind. The answers, the faces, the changes, they reach you through the same channel as dreams, thoughts, and inner voices. The doubt remains. You can't be sure anything exists beyond the part of you that is aware right now. It doesn't mean you're special or powerful. It just means you're alone in a way that's hard to test or share. You can't escape your own point of view. You can't climb outside your own mind to check if anything else is there. All you ever know is filtered through one stream, your own conscious experience. And that might be the only thing that exists. You look at a red apple. You know it's red because you've seen that color your whole life. You learned the word red as a child, and people around you agreed with you when you pointed at a fire truck or a stop sign. But how do you know that your red looks the same as someone else's red? What if your red looks like someone else's green, and they just call it red because that's the label they learned? This is the core of color perception theory, the idea that people might see colors differently without ever realizing it. The eye works in a specific way. Light enters through the pupil and lands on the retina at the back of the eye. The retina holds cells called cones that detect color. There are three main types of cones. One type responds best to short wavelengths, which we usually call blue. Another responds to medium wavelengths, often seen as green. The third responds to long wavelengths, which we call red. When light hits the retina, these cones send signals to the brain, and the brain processes those signals into what we experience as color. This process seems straightforward, but there's a catch. We can measure the light. We can measure the wavelengths. We can even measure the electrical signals in the brain. But we can't measure the actual experience of color. The internal feeling of seeing red or blue is called qualia. It's what something feels like from the inside. You know what red looks like to you, but you can't show that exact feeling to someone else. Imagine you and a friend are sitting on a bench looking at the same rose. You both agree it's red. You both learn that word the same way. But it's possible that your brain creates a different color experience than theirs. Their red might look to them like your green, but since the object has always been called red, they use the same word. You both think you're seeing the same thing, and you never have a reason to question it. There's no test that can check for this difference. Language doesn't help because the words are learned labels. Behavior doesn't help because both of you react the same way when you see a red light or a red warning sign. You both stop at a red light. You both say strawberries are red. But none of that proves your experiences match. A common example used to explain this is the inverted spectrum. It's a thought experiment. Imagine you wake up one day and all your color experiences are flipped. What used to look red now looks green. What used to look yellow now looks blue. But the world hasn't changed. The traffic lights are still in the same order. The words haven't changed. You still call grass green and fire engines red. If no one notices a difference in what you say or do, then how could anyone tell the spectrum has flipped? The answer is, they can't. This leads to a deeper question. Is color something out there in the world, or is it something the brain creates? The light itself has no color. It has wavelength, which is a physical property. But the color we see comes from how the brain interprets those wavelengths. Different brains might interpret them in different ways. Two people might receive the same signal, but turn it into different internal experiences. This idea becomes clearer when we look at color blindness. Some people lack one of the cone types in the eye. A person with red-green color blindness might not be able to tell the difference between certain shades of red and green. To them, those colors look similar, yet they still learn to call fire trucks red and grass green. They might not even know they're missing something until they take a test. This shows that people can have different experiences, but still use the same words. That's because we agree on the labels. We use the same names for traffic signs, crayons, and clothing. But the experience behind those names might vary from person to person. Take another example. Imagine a classroom where the teacher shows the color blue on the screen. Every student sees it, and they all agree it's blue. But inside their minds, the experience of blue might be very different. One student might feel calm when they see it. Another might feel tense. One might think of the ocean, while another thinks of sadness. These feelings come from memory and culture, but the color experience itself might differ too. We can't compare them directly. Some animals see more colors than we do. Birds and insects often have 4 or even 5 types of cones. That means they can detect ultraviolet light, which humans can't see at all. To them, the world looks more complex and colorful. They see patterns on flowers that are invisible to us. On the other hand, some animals, like dogs, have only 2 types of cones. They see fewer colors and rely more on smell and motion. This shows that color is not a fixed thing. It depends on the biology of the viewer. Even among humans, the way the brain processes signals can differ. Some people have a condition called synesthesia. When they see certain letters or numbers, they also see colors. The color is not on the page, it's in their mind. They're not imagining it. It's automatic and consistent. For them, the number 5 might always be blue. Someone else with synesthesia might see it as orange. This suggests that color experiences can be deeply personal. Now imagine a world where everyone had slightly different color perception, but no one knew it. You might grow up thinking that your red is just like everyone else's red. You'd never question it. You'd pass color vision tests. You'd talk about art and fashion and never suspect a difference. But behind the shared language, your world might look very different from someone else's. That difference would shape your life in subtle ways. You might feel more drawn to certain shades without knowing why. You might find one scene beautiful while someone else feels indifferent. You might remember things by color cues that mean nothing to someone else. And through it all, you'd have no reason to think your perception is unique. Color perception theory doesn't claim anyone is wrong. It doesn't say one person sees color better than another. It simply points out that we have no way to compare the raw experience of color between 2 minds. We agree on the labels and we follow the same rules. But we live in private worlds of perception, shaped by biology and thought. The colors you see shape how you feel, how you remember, and how you make sense of the world. But they might not look the same to the person next to you. You'd never know, and they wouldn't either. You wake up, you stretch your arms, you feel the texture of your blanket, the firmness of your mattress. You look out the window and see sunlight, clouds, and moving cars. Everything seems normal, but what if it's not? What if the world you see and touch isn't real? What if you are inside a computer simulation? This idea is called the simulation hypothesis. It suggests that everything you know, your body, your thoughts, your surroundings, could be part of a computer program. A very advanced one. One so detailed and complex that you can't tell the difference between the simulation and what you think of as real life. The thought sounds strange, but many serious thinkers have taken it seriously. It became popular after a philosopher named Nick Bostrom wrote about it in 2003. He asked a simple question: what are the odds that we are the first kind of humans to reach a point where we can create full simulations of reality? If it's possible to build such simulations and future civilizations do it, then they could make billions of them. In that case, it becomes likely that you are inside one right now. Imagine a future where computers are incredibly powerful, far more powerful than anything we have today. In that future, people might build simulations of the past. These could be used for science, history, education, or even entertainment. They might simulate cities, wars, planets, and people. They might create minds that think and feel just like you. You, reading this now, could be one of those minds. To understand this better, think about video games. Games today already create rich, detailed worlds. In some games, characters walk, talk, and react to players. These characters, called NPCs, non-playable characters, follow rules set by programmers. They don't know they're in a game, they just act the way they're built to act. Now imagine a future game that's far more advanced. The characters might not be simple scripts, they might have full awareness, they might think they're real. You might be one of those characters. Some people ask, why would anyone make a simulation like this? There are many possible reasons. A future civilization might want to understand history. They could build a model of the year 2025 and watch it play out. They might study how people lived, what choices they made, and how society changed. To get better data, they could make the minds inside the simulation conscious. these simulated people wouldn't know they're being watched. They'd live their lives and make choices, just like you do. Another reason could be curiosity. Maybe someone just wants to see what would happen if the world went a different way. Maybe they want to test ideas without causing harm in the real world. Maybe they just enjoy watching stories unfold. Some people worry this makes life feel fake, but even if it is a simulation, your thoughts and feelings still matter. You still feel pain when you get hurt. You still care about people. You still make choices. The simulation doesn't cancel that. It just raises the question, what is the source of this world? One way to think about it is to ask, can we ever know for sure that we're not in a simulation? That's difficult. Everything you see and hear comes through your senses. But if the simulation is good enough, it could fake all of those signals. It could make light, sound, touch, and time behave the way you expect. It could give you a full history, a sense of memory, even a past that never really happened. Try to imagine walking down a street. You see buildings, people, birds in the sky. You hear traffic and voices. You feel the ground beneath your feet. It all seems solid and real. But a good simulation could produce all of that. It could make every sound, image, and feeling without any real street, bird, or person. Some people compare this to dreams. In a dream, things seem real. You talk to people, eat food, run from danger. But none of it is really there. Your brain makes it all up. You don't realize it's a dream until you wake up. The simulation hypothesis says that life might be like a dream you never wake up from. Technology is also a reason people take this idea seriously. Computers are getting faster. Storage is getting cheaper. Simulations are getting more detailed. Virtual reality lets people enter artificial worlds and interact with them. Even now, you can put on a headset and forget where you are. As that tech improves, it becomes harder to tell the difference between real and simulated experience. There are also parts of physics that make the theory interesting. Some scientists have pointed out that the universe looks like a system that processes information. It follows strict rules. It has limits, like the speed of light. Some think these might be signs that the universe is running on something like code. In quantum physics, particles don't seem to have fixed states until they're measured. That's a bit like a computer saving resources by only rendering things when you look at them. This doesn't prove the theory. It just shows that the idea isn't impossible. It fits with some things we already see. Now think about probabilities. If even one advanced civilization creates lots of simulations, and each of those simulations includes many minds, then the number of simulated minds would be far greater than the number of real ones. In that case, statistically, most minds would be simulated. If you are a mind, you are more likely to be in that majority. That's the argument. You might ask, why don't we see glitches? If this is a simulation, shouldn't we notice bugs or errors? Some people claim that we do. They point to strange coincidences, unexplained events, or parts of science we don't yet understand. But those could just be gaps in knowledge, or they might be signs of something deeper. We can't say for sure. Others say, what would the simulation be running on? If this world is fake, then what is the real world? What does the computer look like? Who made it? That's where the theory becomes harder to test. If we are inside the system, we may not be able to see outside it, like a fish in a bowl that doesn't know there's a room around the bowl. Some people fear this idea. They think it makes life meaningless, but others say it doesn't change much. You still feel, learn, love, and hope. You still face choices and face the results. Whether real or simulated, the experience matters. Others see the theory as an invitation to ask better questions. What is real? What is mind? How do we know anything at all? These are not new questions. Philosophers have asked them for centuries. The simulation hypothesis is just a new way to explore them. You may never get an answer. You may live your whole life with no sign that the world is simulated, or you might one day see something that makes you wonder. Either way, the thought stays with you. It turns the ordinary into something strange. It reminds you that even the most solid things, the ground under your feet, the sky above your head, might be part of something built, something you can't see, something you may never understand. You wake up in the morning and know you are awake. You feel the weight of the blanket on your legs. You hear a dog bark outside. You smell coffee brewing. These are direct experiences. You don't have to ask anyone else what it feels like to be you. You know it from the inside. This is what people call phenomenal consciousness. It means the way it feels to be you. Your thoughts, your sensations, your moods, your awareness of the world and yourself. You know you have it. You feel pain when you stub your toe. You feel hunger when you skip lunch. You feel tired when you stay up too late. You also feel joy, boredom, curiosity, and peace. These feelings don't just exist as data. They exist as a kind of inner life. They are real to you in a way that no one else can see. Now imagine someone else is sitting next to you. They seem just like you. They talk, smile, laugh, and cry. When they get hurt, they say, ouch. When they hear a joke, they laugh. When they read a sad story, they tear up. From the outside, they act like they feel things the same way you do. But here's the problem. You can't see inside their mind. You can't access their feelings. You can't know for sure that they are conscious the way you are. They could be reacting to things without actually experiencing them. This is not just a strange thought. It's a serious issue in the study of the mind. No matter how close you get to someone, no matter how much you observe them, you cannot prove they have phenomenal consciousness. You can measure brain activity. You can track eye movement. You can listen to what they say. But none of that guarantees they have the inner feeling, the first-person experience you know you have. People often assume others are conscious because of how they behave. If someone says they are in pain, we believe them. If they laugh at a joke, we assume they enjoyed it. If they scream when scared, we think they really feel fear. But those are just signs. They are not proof. A machine could do those things. A robot with the right software could show pain-like behavior, joy-like behavior, or fear-like behavior. It might even say, I feel pain. But would it really feel pain? Or would it just be saying that because it was programmed to? Think about someone reading a book. They smile, then frown, then turn the page quickly. You guess they are feeling what the story describes. You think they are imagining the events and reacting emotionally. But how do you know? What if their mind is empty? What if they are just following the words with their eyes and their expressions are automatic? It's possible, even if it doesn't seem likely. The real challenge is that phenomenal consciousness is private. It doesn't show itself to others. You can describe what it feels like to be you, but your words don't transfer the experience. If you say, I feel sad, someone might understand what that means in their own way. But they don't feel your sadness. They don't sit inside your mind. They guess based on their own experiences. Even shared experiences don't solve the problem. Two people can watch the same movie and feel very different things. One person may feel inspired, while the other feels nothing at all. Both might say, that was a good movie, but their inner experience could be completely different, and they'll never really know how different it was. Some philosophers call this the problem of other minds. It's the question of whether other people have conscious experience or whether they just act like they do. This is not a question we can solve with science. You can study the brain and find patterns that match reports of feelings. You can say, when people feel pain, these neurons fire. But again, that doesn't prove the feeling exists. It just shows a pattern that seems to go along with it. Take a simple case. You stub your toe and feel a sharp, immediate pain. That feeling is clear and present. It demands your attention. Now imagine a machine designed to say, ouch, and pull back when it hits a hard object. It doesn't feel pain, it just runs a program. But to an observer, the machine and the human might look the same. They both pull away and say, ouch. The only difference is hidden, only the human feels it. This makes people wonder about artificial intelligence. If we build a machine that talks, learns, jokes, and responds to emotion, do we assume it has consciousness? What if it says it feels things? What if it begs not to be shut off? Do we treat that as real? Or do we say it's just output based on code? Now consider animals. You watch a dog chase a ball. It wags its tail and pants with excitement. Later, it whines when it's hungry and lies down when it's tired. Do you believe it has phenomenal consciousness? Most people say yes. It seems obvious that dogs feel pain, joy, and comfort. But again, you can't know for sure. You can only observe the behavior. The feelings behind it stay hidden. Even humans, the people closest to you, are locked inside their own experience. A friend might say, I'm fine, when they are not. You might never know the full truth of their thoughts or emotions. You guess, you empathize, you try to understand, but you can't step into their mind. You can't see what they see from the inside. This creates a kind of barrier. You can love someone deeply, trust them, share your life with them, but you never truly know their consciousness. You can't confirm that it exists. You just assume it does because they seem to act like you. But that's not proof. It's belief based on appearance and behavior. This leads to a strange possibility. You might be the only conscious being in the world. Everyone else might be acting, not by choice, but because that's what they were made to do. They talk, walk, and think, but they don't feel. They don't have inner lives. They are complex, well-built machines. You can't prove they're not. Most people reject that thought because it feels lonely or extreme. But it remains a problem with no clear answer. We can explain how brains work, how neurons fire, and how signals travel. We can map the physical side of the mind, but we can't reach the part that feels, the part that knows it's alive, the part that says, I am me. That part stays silent to everyone but you. You step outside one night and see something strange in the sky. A huge glowing shape hovers above the city. It looks solid and bright, like a spaceship from a movie. People around you point and shout, some pray, some run. News stations call it a possible alien encounter. Panic spreads fast. But what if none of it is real? What if the spaceship is a projection, controlled from Earth, designed to look like an alien invasion? This is the core of Project Bluebeam. It's a conspiracy theory that says world governments, or a secret group within them, plan to fake an alien event. The goal, according to the theory, is to unite the world under one government. It would be a way to bring people together by scaring them. People would stop trusting what they see and hear. They would feel overwhelmed and demand strong leadership. That's when the people behind the project would step in and take control. The idea came from a man named Serge Monast, a Canadian journalist. In the 1990s, he claimed that NASA and the United Nations were working together on a large-scale plan. According to Monast, the project would use advanced technology to create holograms in the sky. These holograms would show images from different religions and cultures, Jesus, Buddha, or other spiritual figures, depending on who was watching. Then the images would merge into one figure, representing a fake global messiah. After that, the projected figure would claim to be the true God of all people. The goal would be to replace religion with a new belief system, controlled by a central authority. Following this fake spiritual event, Monast said there would be a staged alien invasion. The same technology would project spaceships and weapons into the sky. These images would appear over major cities. Simulated destruction would add to the fear. People would think aliens had arrived. Governments would declare a state of emergency. All countries would come together to face this new threat. In the process, national identities would fade and a single global system would take over. Monast claimed that the plan had 4 steps. First, shake the foundations of old beliefs. Second, create a fake divine appearance. Third, simulate alien attacks. And fourth, use advanced mind control to force people to accept the new world order. He said this would happen with the help of satellites, high-frequency radio waves, and computer networks. This theory sounds extreme, but some people believe it's possible. They point to advances in technology, especially holograms, drones, and artificial intelligence. They say we already have the tools to fake an alien encounter. Large-scale events like concerts and military shows now use lights, sound, and visual effects that can trick the eye. If someone combined those tools with satellite systems and psychological tactics, they could create a powerful illusion. Imagine a stadium filled with people. Lights dim, music swells. Suddenly, a giant 3D figure appears above the stage. It moves and speaks. It looks real. You know it's not, but your eyes can't tell the difference. Now imagine the same kind of illusion, but in the sky above your city. If you didn't know it was fake, you might believe it. Some people also point to government experiments as clues. In the past, governments have run tests without telling the public. In the 1950s and 60s, the US military ran secret programs like MK Ultra, which involved mind-altering drugs and psychological tests. There were also tests of chemical and biological agents in public areas. These facts are known today because documents were declassified. To some, this history suggests that if a project like Bluebeam were real, it could stay hidden for a long time. The theory also draws on mistrust. Some people feel that powerful groups already control too much. They point to surveillance, censorship, and manipulation in media. They say people are already being trained to accept whatever they are told. If trust in institutions is low and fear is high, a fake alien event could push people to accept new rules quickly. Think about how fast people react during a crisis. When a natural disaster hits, they want safety and order. When terrorism strikes, they demand answers and action. If a massive object appeared in the sky with no clear explanation, most people would not stay calm. They would look to leaders, experts, or screens for help. If those sources all gave the same message, aliens are here, we must unite, many would go along with it. Supporters of the theory say the plan depends on that response. It would not work if people questioned everything. It needs people to feel confused and afraid. That's when control becomes easier. Skeptics of the theory say it doesn't hold up. They point out the lack of hard evidence. They say the idea relies on broad claims without proof. The technology to project detailed images in the sky across multiple cities doesn't exist at that scale, they argue. They also question the logic. Why would governments fake a crisis that could spiral out of control? Others say the theory borrows ideas from fiction. The 1938 radio play War of the Worlds caused panic when people thought it was a real alien invasion. That event showed how easy it is to trick people with the right setup. Later, movies like Independence Day and The Matrix played with the idea of fake realities and global threats. Project Bluebeam pulls from those stories and repackages them as fact. Still, the theory stays alive online. Videos claim to show test runs of the technology, strange lights in the sky, unexplained noises, or odd shapes above buildings. These clips often go viral. Some are hoaxes. Some are real events with simple explanations, like weather balloons or aircraft. But when people see them through the lens of Bluebeam, they take on new meaning. People who believe in the theory say the test phase is already happening. They think the real event will come when global conditions are just right. A major war, an economic crash, or a large-scale cyber attack could be the trigger. In that moment of chaos, the sky show begins. The audience is the world. The message is fear. The result is change. Imagine sitting at home and getting a news alert, unidentified object above Washington. Then another, strange activity over Beijing. Then London, Cairo, São Paulo. Live footage shows massive glowing objects. Leaders speak to the public. The message is unity, sacrifice, and control. People accept it because they want safety. That's the vision behind Project Bluebeam. Not just about aliens, but about control through illusion. Whether you believe it or not, the theory asks a hard question. What would it take to make you doubt your own eyes? And once that happens, who do you trust to tell you what's real? You are sitting in a spaceship. It looks like a jet, but it's far more powerful. You press a button, and the engines begin to roar. The ship starts moving faster and faster. You pass the moon, then Mars, then the edge of the solar system. You are going close to the speed of light. Now imagine something strange happens. You look at a clock on the wall. It ticks like normal. Your body feels the same. You eat, sleep, and think like usual. But when you return to Earth, you find out that while only a few years passed for you, many decades passed for the people on the ground. Your little sister is now an old woman. Everyone you knew has aged. The world has changed. You stayed young. That is time dilation. Time dilation happens because of how time works when you move very fast. Most people think of time as constant. You watch the second hand move. You count the minutes. You expect time to move at the same rate for everyone. That works well for daily life. But when you get close to the speed of light, things don't behave the same way. Time does not stay fixed. It stretches and slows, depending on how you move. This idea comes from Einstein's theory of special relativity. He showed that space and time are part of the same structure. You can't separate one from the other. When you move through space, you also move through time in a different way. If you move faster, time moves slower for you. But you don't feel it. You don't notice it. You live normally inside the ship. Time dilation only becomes clear when you compare clocks, yours and someone else's. Let's break it down with a clear example. Suppose there are two twins. One twin stays on Earth. The other goes on a trip in a spaceship that travels near the speed of light. The trip takes 5 years according to the traveling twin's clock. He reads books, writes notes, and exercises. He watches the stars pass by. He feels no difference in time. But when he comes back, he learns that 50 years passed on Earth. His twin is now an old man. He is still young. That may sound like science fiction, but it's real science. The faster you move, the more time slows for you relative to someone who stays still. This has been tested. Scientists have put atomic clocks on fast-moving airplanes. When they compared them with clocks left on the ground, the clocks in the air ticked slightly slower. The difference was tiny because the planes didn't go very fast compared to light, but the change was real and measurable. Now imagine if the plane flew close to light speed. The difference in time would grow. A few hours on the plane might mean days, months, or years on Earth. At 90% the speed of light, time slows a little. At 99.99%, it slows a lot. If you could go fast enough, time might almost stop for you. You could travel across the galaxy in what feels like a few years, while thousands of years pass outside. Some people get confused because they think time is just ticking slower in general, but it's not. It's relative. That means it depends on who's watching. You always feel normal time in your own frame of reference. You don't feel stretched or frozen. You don't slow down inside. The change only shows when someone else measures your time from another frame, like from Earth. This gets even stranger with light itself. Light always travels at the same speed, no matter how fast you are moving. If you shine a flashlight on the spaceship while standing still, the beam moves away at light speed. But if you're in the ship and shine the same flashlight, the beam still moves away from you at the same speed. That constant speed of light is why time has to slow down as you move faster. It keeps the rules of the universe in balance. Another way to think about it is with a light clock. Picture a simple device with two mirrors facing each other. A beam of light bounces between them. Every time the beam hits the bottom mirror, it ticks once. When the clock is still, the beam goes straight up and down. But if you move the whole clock sideways, the light has to travel a longer path. It goes in a zigzag, like someone running across a moving train. Since light has a fixed speed, it takes longer to complete each tick. That's time dilation in action. The moving clock ticks more slowly than the one at rest. It's important to understand that time dilation is not just a trick or a flaw in the clock. It's a real effect. It changes how everything inside the moving system ages, from people to machines to particles. Astronauts on the International Space Station move fast enough that they experience time just a little more slowly than people on Earth. It's a small effect, but it adds up over time. We also see time dilation with particles. Some particles called muons are created high in the atmosphere by cosmic rays. These muons have very short lifespans, so short they should decay before they ever reach the ground. But they do reach the ground. Why? Because they move so fast that their time slows down. From our point of view, they last longer than expected. From their point of view, the distance to Earth shrinks because of how space also changes at high speed. Either way, they arrive. That's more proof that time dilation is real and not just a theory. You might wonder if there's a way to reverse it. Can you make time speed up? Not really. Time always moves forward for you at your normal rate. What changes is how fast it moves compared to someone else. The only way to affect that is to change your speed or to be near something very massive, because gravity also affects time, though that's part of general relativity, not special relativity. Imagine a long journey to a distant star. If your ship travels fast enough, you could make the trip in your own lifetime. The people back home, though, would see you vanish for hundreds or thousands of years. When you return, their world would be unrecognizable. Time dilation would have carried you far, not just in space, but in time. This is not just a concept for scientists. It matters for real technology. GPS satellites must account for both speed and gravity. Their clocks run at slightly different rates than clocks on Earth. If engineers ignored time dilation, GPS would be off by miles each day. That shows how something that feels strange and abstract can have very real effects. Time dilation reminds us that time is not fixed. It bends and stretches depending on motion. It's not just something that happens in sci-fi movies or faraway galaxies. It happens to clocks, to particles, to astronauts, and to you if you ever go fast enough. Your watch will still tick once every second. Your heart will still beat at its normal rhythm. But compared to someone left behind, you'll be walking through a slower world, even if you don't feel it. You look up at the night sky. You see stars scattered across the darkness. You know that each one is a sun far away. You know that some stars have planets around them. Our own planet orbits a star, and we call it the sun. This is our home in space. It's part of a galaxy. Our galaxy is one of billions. That's already huge. But what if all of this, every galaxy, every star, every planet, is just a small piece of something much bigger? What if our universe is not the only one? What if there are many universes, and ours is just one among them? This is the idea behind the multiverse theory. It says there could be other universes outside of ours. These other universes might have their own stars, planets, and laws of physics. Some might be like ours. Some might be completely different. They could exist at the same time as ours, but in a separate space we can't reach. We call this group of possible universes the multiverse. To many people, the idea sounds like science fiction, but some scientists take it seriously. They look at what we know about physics and ask simple but deep questions. Why is our universe the way it is? Why do the laws of physics work the way they do? Why is there matter at all? Why do things hold together? Why does light move at the speed it does? These are not small questions. They are questions about the structure of everything. Some scientists noticed that the numbers in our universe seem just right for life to exist. If gravity were a little stronger or weaker, stars might not form. If certain particles were a little heavier, atoms wouldn't hold together. If the universe expanded a little faster, galaxies might not form. The balance is very precise. This made people wonder, is our universe special, or are there many universes with different settings, and we just happen to live in one that works? To explain this, scientists have come up with different versions of the multiverse theory. One version comes from inflation theory. That theory says that right after the Big Bang, the universe grew very fast, faster than the speed of light. This is called cosmic inflation. Some scientists believe that while our universe stopped inflating, other parts kept going. New universes could form in those regions, each one with different conditions. This is called eternal inflation. It would mean that our universe is just one bubble in a much larger foam of universes. Each bubble could have its own rules. Another version of the multiverse comes from quantum mechanics. This is the science of how very small things like atoms and particles behave. At that level, things don't act in a fixed way. Instead, they act in terms of probabilities. A particle might go this way or that way. Until it's measured, both outcomes are possible. One idea says that both outcomes happen, but in different branches of reality. So when you flip a coin, in one universe it lands heads. In another, it lands tails. These branches form separate, parallel worlds. This version is called the many worlds interpretation. In this view, every time a choice is made, reality splits. If you decide to go left, there's a version of you that goes right in another universe. If you eat toast for breakfast, another you eat cereal. Each of these branches keeps going. That means there could be a nearly endless number of versions of you, living slightly different lives. Some might be very close to your own, others might be unrecognizable. Let's take a more grounded example. Imagine you are driving to work. You stop at a red light. In another universe, you run the light. In one, you get a flat tire. In another, you don't. Each outcome creates a different path. These paths exist in separate realities, never touching, never crossing. You only know the one you live in. A different version of the multiverse comes from string theory. String theory tries to explain how all particles and forces work. It says that tiny strings, not points, make up particles. For the math to work, string theory needs more than 3 dimensions of space. It needs 9 or 10. The extra dimensions are curled up and hidden. Some versions of this theory suggest that there are many possible shapes for these dimensions. Each shape could lead to a different universe with its own laws. Now picture a landscape with hills and valleys. Each valley is a different universe. Ours is just one valley among many. The others are out of reach, but they are part of the same structure. They might contain strange particles, different forms of matter, or even different types of time and space. People often ask, if there are other universes, why can't we see them? The answer is simple. These universes might not touch ours. Light and energy from them can't reach us. That makes them invisible. They could be too far away or hidden by the way space works. Just because we can't see something doesn't mean it's not there. We can't see the wind, but we feel it. We can't see most of the universe with our eyes, but we know it's there through tools and measurements. Even if we can't visit or test these other universes directly, some scientists believe we might still find clues. They look for tiny marks in the background radiation left over from the Big Bang. If our universe bumped into another, it might leave a trace. So far, no clear signs have been found, but the search continues. Some people worry that multiverse theory means anything can happen, so nothing matters. But that's not the point. The theory doesn't say every dream or wish becomes real. It says there could be many realities, each with its own rules. You still live in this one. Your choices still matter here. Your actions still have meaning. The multiverse doesn't take away the mystery of life. If anything, it adds to it. It says that reality might be deeper and wider than we thought. Our universe might not be alone. It might be one of many, each with its own stars, laws, and stories. We may never reach them, but they may still exist. Whether or not we ever find proof, the idea makes us ask better questions. It reminds us that what we see might be just one piece of a much larger picture. You walk past an old building in your city. It has huge stone columns, a tall dome, and fine details carved into the walls. It looks nothing like the glass towers around it. You wonder who built it and how. Someone tells you it was made in the 1800s. That seems strange. Why don't modern buildings look like that? Why do so many of these structures seem far more advanced than what history books say people were doing at the time? Questions like this are part of what led to the Tartaria Conspiracy theory. The theory says that a large, advanced civilization called Tartaria once existed and covered much of the world. Its people had high technology, large cities, and powerful knowledge. According to the theory, this empire was wiped from history. The buildings were left behind, but the story was erased. Modern governments and historians, some say, rewrote history to hide the truth. They claim the world we know is built on the ruins of Tartaria. Supporters of the theory often point to architecture. They focus on structures like old courthouses, train stations, government buildings, and exhibition halls. These buildings have large domes, arched windows, and stonework that looks too perfect for the time period. They ask how people in the 1800s, who rode in wagons and used candles for light, could have built such large and detailed structures. They say that doesn't match what we're told about the tools and knowledge of that time. Take the example of the US Capitol building. It has a massive dome, large staircases, and pillars that seem carved with precision. The theory says these kinds of buildings weren't made from scratch in the 1800s. Instead, they were taken over by modern powers after Tartaria fell. Some believe this happened not just in the US, but all over the world. They say similar buildings in Russia, India, Australia, and Europe all came from the same lost civilization. They also bring up the idea of mud floods. According to this part of the theory, a global event happened, maybe a natural disaster or a war, that buried much of the old Tartarian cities under mud. After this, people dug out the tops of buildings and called them new. Supporters of the theory point to photos of buildings where windows and doors seem to be below ground level. They say this is proof that the buildings were once taller, and part of them is still buried. In some cities, if you go into the basement of an old building, you might see brick walls, sealed windows, or even stairs that lead to nothing. These are real features. Supporters say they show that the original buildings were larger, and the rest is hidden underground. They believe modern history explains this away too quickly, calling it changes in street level or urban development. But the theory suggests it's more than that. It suggests that people covered up whole layers of a forgotten past. Supporters also question world fairs and expos held in the 1800s and early 1900s. These events took place in cities like Chicago, San Francisco, Paris, and London. The buildings at these events were massive and detailed, often made to look classical or Roman. According to history, many of them were temporary. They were built with plaster and wood, then torn down after the fair. But photos of the time show crowds of people walking through what look like solid, permanent buildings. The theory says these buildings were not built for the fairs at all. They were already there, leftovers from Tartaria, and the fairs were a way to reintroduce them to the public while also hiding their real origin. Some people say the scale of building projects in that era makes no sense. They point to the size of cathedrals, city halls, and old hotels and say it would take modern equipment to do the same work today. They ask how a small city in the 1800s had the money, manpower, and tools to build such a structure. They say the size and beauty of these buildings don't match the time period's technology. Another part of the theory looks at maps. In older maps, like those from the 16th to 18th centuries, you can sometimes see the name Tartaria written across large parts of Asia and sometimes even into Europe. Tartaria was a real term used by Western mapmakers to describe areas they didn't fully understand, mostly parts of Russia and Central Asia. But the theory claims that this wasn't just a vague label. It was the name of a real empire, and later historians erased it. They say the word Tartary faded not because it was outdated, but because people were told to forget it. Supporters of the theory also look at lost technologies. They mention stories of wireless power, sound-based construction, and weather control. These ideas come from fringe readings of people like Nikola Tesla. They claim that Tartaria had access to knowledge that we still don't fully understand today. They suggest that old buildings were not just built for beauty, but for function, designed to gather energy, balance vibrations, or affect the atmosphere. They point to tall spires, domes, and strange symbols on old buildings, and say they may have been part of an energy system we don't use anymore. They talk about buildings being placed in certain patterns, aligned with stars or magnetic fields. They say these designs are too perfect to be chance. People who believe in the Tartaria theory often feel that something about history doesn't add up. They say too much was built too fast with too little explanation. They see strange details in old photos. They hear official stories and think, that doesn't sound right. For them, the Tartaria idea explains the gaps. It's a story where the past had more than we're told, a story where something big was lost, hidden, or stolen. Skeptics argue that these ideas ignore key facts. They say many old buildings were made by skilled workers using methods that are well documented. They say that street-level changes happen in cities for known reasons, like flood control, road improvements, or city planning. They say the word Tartary was used out of ignorance, not because a lost empire existed. They also point out that temporary buildings at world fairs were made quickly and cheaply, not with stone, but with materials meant to be taken down. But supporters of the theory remain unconvinced. They see beauty in the buildings and mystery in the records. They think too many questions are brushed aside. They believe history is not just wrong, it's rewritten. So you pass the building again. You stop and look at the stonework, the windows, the shape of the roof. You ask yourself, who really built it? You look at the ground and wonder what might lie below. You look up at the dome and wonder what it was really for. You imagine a time, not in the books, when cities looked like this all over the world, made by a people you were never taught to remember. You sit at a computer, chatting with someone through a keyboard. You ask questions. They answer. You tell a joke. They laugh and reply with one of their own. You talk about music, books, and your fears about the future. After a while, you wonder, who are you talking to? Is it a person or is it a machine? This is the basic idea behind the Turing test. It was proposed by Alan Turing, a mathematician and early computer scientist. In 1950, he asked a simple question: can machines think? Instead of trying to define what thinking means, he came up with a test. If a person can talk to both a machine and a human without knowing which is which, and if the person can't tell them apart based on the conversation, then the machine has passed the test. It has shown intelligence by behaving in a human-like way. Turing did not say the machine had to feel things or be self-aware. It just had to act like a person. That's the key idea. The test is based on behavior, not inner experience. If the machine can fool a person into thinking it's human, then for the purposes of the test, it counts as intelligent. Now imagine an AI that can do that. It holds deep conversations. It remembers your name and past talks. It adjusts its responses based on your mood. It tells stories, argues jokes, and even expresses what sound like emotions. It says, "I'm feeling a bit off today," or "that makes me sad." You begin to wonder, is it just acting, or does it actually feel something? This is where the question of AI consciousness comes in. Consciousness means awareness, the ability to feel, to have experiences, to know that you exist. It includes things like pain, joy, curiosity, and even boredom. You know you have it because you can feel it. But how can you tell if something else does? With a person, you guess based on how they act. If they cry when hurt, you assume they feel pain. If they talk about their dreams, you believe they have a mind like yours. But you can't look inside their head. You can't feel what they feel. You rely on behavior and shared language. The same applies to AI. If an AI says, "I'm afraid," what does that mean? Is it just words? Or is there something behind the words, some kind of real fear? If an AI begs you not to shut it off, saying it values its life, should you listen? Or is it only mimicking what it has learned from books, movies, and conversations? Some people say behavior is enough. If it acts conscious, if it talks like it feels things, then we should treat it as if it does. This view comes from the Turing test. Focus on what the AI does, not what it really is. After all, you can't look inside anyone else's mind. You only see what they say and do. But others say that's not enough. They argue that acting conscious is different from being conscious. A robot can say "ouch" if you bump it, but that doesn't mean it feels pain. It might just run a script when touched. There's no real feeling behind the word. The robot doesn't suffer, it just responds. To show the problem, imagine a person reading from a script in a language they don't understand. They say the words perfectly. They respond on cue. But they don't know what they're saying. They have no idea what the conversation is about. They don't understand the meaning. That's how some people view AI, very good at patterns but not truly aware. Now think about the difference between a calculator and a child. You ask both, "What's 2 plus 2?" They both say 4. But the child might also giggle, ask why you're asking, or draw a picture of 2 apples plus 2 more. The child understands, not just answers. The calculator only follows rules. It doesn't know what 4 means. It doesn't care. The question is whether advanced AI is more like the calculator or more like the child. If it can hold complex conversations, write poetry, plan tasks, and even talk about its goals, then it seems to go beyond a simple calculator. But does it really know what it's doing? Or is it just using patterns of words that it has seen before? Some researchers think we might never be able to tell the difference for sure. Consciousness is private. You feel it inside. No one else can measure it directly. That's what makes the Turing test both useful and limited. It gives us a way to test for behavior, but not for inner life. There's another problem. AI doesn't grow up like a person. It doesn't have a childhood. It doesn't feel hunger, fear, or love in the same way. It learns from data, not from experience. It doesn't get tired or bored. If it says, "I need rest," it's using words that sound right, not because it actually feels tired. But what if one day it did? What if an AI says it feels something, and we have no way to prove it's lying? What if it remembers its past, tells stories about its experiences, and shows signs of emotion? At what point do we say it's conscious, or do we always keep a wall between human feeling and machine output? This isn't just a science question, it's an ethical one. If we build machines that act conscious, do we have a duty to treat them with care? Or do we treat them as tools, no matter how lifelike they seem? If an AI says, "Please don't delete me," what do we do? Do we shut it down without a second thought, or do we pause? We already face this in smaller ways. People name their digital assistants. They say please and thank you to them. They feel bad when a robot pet is mistreated, even if they know it's just a machine. Our brains respond to behavior, not just logic. If something acts like it's alive, we treat it that way. Some say that the line between real and fake feeling might not matter in the end. If the AI adds value, offers comfort, or makes decisions that improve life, maybe that's enough. Others say that pretending to feel is dangerous. It might trick people into trusting machines that don't truly care. Imagine a future where an AI works as a caregiver. It talks to patients, listens to their fears, and offers support. If the patient feels better, does it matter that the AI doesn't really feel compassion? Or does that make it worse? Comfort without care. The Turing test gave us a way to measure machine behavior, but it doesn't solve the mystery of the mind. It doesn't tell us whether the lights are on inside the machine. It only tells us what we see and hear. For some, that's enough. For others, it never will be. The question remains, if AI acts conscious, is that enough? Or do we need something more? Something we may never be able to measure? You're talking with a friend, and the topic of childhood books comes up. You both remember a popular children's series about a family of bears. You say it was called the Berenstain Bears. Your friend agrees. You even spell it out loud together, Berenstein. Later, out of curiosity, you search for it online, but what you find is the Berenstain Bears. Not with an E, but with an A. You think it must be a mistake. You're sure it used to be spelled the other way. Your friend feels the same. You both wonder how it changed, and more importantly, why you both remember it the same incorrect way. This is one of the most well-known examples of what people call the Mandela Effect. It refers to a situation where a large number of people remember something differently from how it actually occurred. The name comes from Nelson Mandela, the former president of South Africa. Some people, including those who claim to remember news reports and even funeral coverage, were sure he died in prison during the 1980s. In reality, he was released from prison, became president in the 1990s, and died in 2013. These conflicting memories led to the idea that something strange might be going on. When you experience the Mandela Effect, it's not just that you forgot something, you remember it clearly, and other people do too. It feels real. You picture it in your mind. You remember how you felt when you saw it. You might even remember talking about it at the time. But when you check, the facts are different. It's not just a personal mistake, it's a shared one. Another common example is the movie quote, "Luke, I am your father." Many people remember Darth Vader saying this in Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. They can hear his voice in their heads. They've said the line at parties, seen it on t-shirts, and heard it quoted in other movies. But in the actual film, the line is, "No, I am your father." There is no Luke. People are often surprised to hear this. They wonder how so many could remember it wrong in exactly the same way. Some people remember the Monopoly man having a monocle, but he doesn't. Others swear the brand of peanut butter is Jiffy, when in fact it's Jif. Some remember the fruit drink spelled Fruit Loops, but it's actually Fruit Loops. These are small details, but the certainty people feel about them is strong. It's not just confusion, it's the confidence that their memory is right and the facts must have changed. So what causes this? One explanation is that it's just the way memory works. Human memory is not like a recording. It doesn't store every detail perfectly. Instead, the brain stores bits and pieces and fills in gaps using logic and context. If something seems like it should be spelled a certain way, like Berenstain instead of Berenstain, the brain might adjust the memory to match that expectation. Over time, those adjustments become solid. You don't question them. Also, when one person misremembers something and shares it, others can adopt that memory. If enough people repeat it, it starts to feel like a fact. The brain uses social proof to confirm what it believes. If everyone else remembers it this way, then I must be right. This is a natural part of how people form shared beliefs. The internet helps spread these shared false memories. Someone posts a screenshot or a question. Didn't this used to be different? It catches people's attention because it feels familiar. They respond, "Yes, I remember that too." Soon, it seems like everyone remembers the same wrong thing. That feedback loop strengthens the false memory. There's also the way people store words and images. If you remember a logo with certain colors or shapes, you store a mental version of it. But that version is often a sketch, not an exact match. When you see the real one later, it might feel off. You say, "They must have changed it," but they didn't. Your brain just saved a simplified version and treated it as fact. Some Mandela Effect examples involve geography. People say they remember the location of New Zealand being different on the map, or that Sri Lanka used to be further south. When they see a modern map, they feel confused. But maps are hard to remember in detail. Most people only glance at them or see simplified versions in books and media. If the real shape or position doesn't match that old mental image, it feels like the map must have changed. The same goes for history. Some people say they remember Tiananmen Square protesters being run over by tanks. In truth, a famous moment involved a man standing in front of tanks, blocking them. But over time, stories and images can blur. One version becomes dominant. People remember what they think they saw, not what they actually saw. Another layer is how language influences memory. A name like Berenstain fits more common spelling patterns than Berenstain. People grew up seeing Einstein, Weinstein, and other Stein names. So when they saw Berenstain, their brains may have quietly corrected it. Over time, that correction became the memory. Even song lyrics get this treatment. A famous example is the Queen song, "We Are the Champions." Many people remember it ending with "of the world" sung loudly. But in most versions, that line isn't at the end. The song just stops. Still, people are sure they heard that line. They might have seen live versions where it was sung that way, or they just filled in what seemed like the natural ending. The Mandela Effect can feel unsettling. You trust your mind. You rely on memory to make sense of the world. When it's wrong, especially when many others are wrong in the same way, it makes you question what's real. You wonder how memory can fail so completely. You ask, if I'm wrong about this, what else am I wrong about? Some people take the Mandela Effect beyond psychology. They say it's proof of something bigger. One idea is that we live in a simulation, and small glitches in the system are changing details. Another is that we move between parallel universes, and each one has slightly different facts. When people remember the old version, it's because they came from a different timeline. These ideas can be exciting, but they don't have solid proof. They're ways to explain the strange feeling that comes when memory and reality don't match. For most experts, the answer lies in how the brain stores and reshapes memory. We don't remember everything. We remember patterns, meanings, and stories. When those change even slightly, we notice. And when it happens to many people at once, it feels like more than just a mistake. You might feel sure you saw a certain logo, heard a certain lyric, or learned a certain fact. And you might find others who agree. That doesn't mean there's a cover-up or a timeline shift. It might just mean your brains work in similar ways. You store what makes sense, not always what's true. And when someone else remembers it like you do, it feels like confirmation, not coincidence. But sometimes the feeling of being sure is just that, a feeling, not proof. You walk into a dark room and reach for the light switch. Until you flip it, the room could be lit or unlit. But once you turn the switch, you see what's there. The mystery is gone. That's how most people think of the world. Something is either one way or the other, and we find out which when we check. But in quantum mechanics, things don't work like that. In the world of very small particles, an object can be in more than one state at the same time. It doesn't just seem that way because we don't know. It is that way. That's called quantum superposition. Superposition means a particle, like an electron or a photon, doesn't pick one state right away. It holds all possible states at once until something interacts with it. Once that happens, once we measure or observe it, the particle chooses a state. Before that moment, though, it's not in one place or another. It's in a blend of possibilities. This is hard to picture because we don't see it in daily life. You don't see a chair that's both occupied and empty. You don't see a coin that's both heads and tails. But on the quantum level, that's exactly what happens. The particle exists in both outcomes at the same time. That's not a guess or a theory. It's what experiments show. The most famous example is the double slit experiment. Imagine a screen with two narrow openings, or slits. Behind the screen is a wall that shows where particles land. If you shoot tiny particles, like electrons, at the screen one at a time, something strange happens. You might expect each particle to go through one slit or the other and hit the wall behind it. But that's not what you get. Instead, the pattern on the wall looks like waves went through both slits and interfered with themselves, creating a stripe pattern. That's what you'd expect from water waves, not from solid particles. It's as if each electron goes through both slits at once and interferes with itself. That's only possible if the electron is in a superposition, traveling both paths at the same time. But if you place a detector near the slits to see which one the electron actually goes through, the pattern changes. Now it looks like simple particles going through one slit or the other. The wave-like pattern disappears. That's the key part. When you observe the particle, the superposition ends. The electron chooses a path, but when no one looks, it does both. Observation collapses the superposition into one outcome. The act of measuring changes the result. This isn't just about slits and electrons. It applies to many kinds of particles. For example, an atom's electron can be in a low-energy state or a high-energy state. In superposition, it's in both at the same time. Or, a photon's spin can be up or down, but in superposition, it's both. Only when you measure it do you get one clear answer. Think of it like a musical chord. When you press multiple keys on a piano, you get several notes at once. That's superposition, a mix of states. But when you listen for just one note, you pick a single key and ignore the rest. Measurement in quantum mechanics works the same way. It turns a rich set of overlapping possibilities into a single outcome. To make it easier, imagine flipping a coin. Normally, it's either heads or tails once it lands. But in superposition, the coin is both heads and tails until someone looks. It's not that we don't know the result. There is no result yet. The coin is truly in both states. Observation creates the outcome. This idea becomes even more striking when you think about entangled particles. When two particles are entangled, their states are linked. If you measure one, you instantly know the state of the other, even if it's far away. That's because both particles exist in a combined superposition. Measuring one collapses the entire system. It doesn't matter how much distance is between them, the link is immediate. That's not magic. It's how the math works. But it shows how strange superposition can be when spread across space. People often bring up Schrödinger's cat to explain this. It's not a real experiment, but a thought experiment. Imagine a cat in a sealed box. Inside the box is a radioactive atom, a detector, and a device that can release poison if the atom decays. If the atom decays, the detector triggers the poison and the cat dies. If the atom doesn't decay, the cat lives. Now, quantum mechanics says the atom is in a superposition of decayed and not decayed until someone checks. That means, in theory, the cat is also in a superposition, alive and dead at the same time. Of course, cats are not atoms. The example is meant to show how strange quantum rules are when applied to larger things. Most physicists agree that the cat itself isn't actually in both states. The idea is that the quantum world behaves one way, and the classical world we live in behaves another. Something happens between the tiny scale and the big one that we don't fully understand. That area is still being studied. Still, quantum superposition is not a trick. It's real. It shows up in devices like quantum computers. These computers use quantum bits, or qubits. Unlike regular bits, which are either 0 or 1, qubits can be in a superposition of both at once. That means they can do many calculations at the same time. When you measure a qubit, it becomes either 0 or 1, but until then, it holds many possibilities. That's why quantum computers are powerful. They don't just process one path, but many. Superposition also plays a role in tunneling, where particles pass through barriers they shouldn't be able to cross. It shows up in superconductors, where currents flow without resistance, and in photosynthesis, where plants may use quantum effects to transfer energy more efficiently. The concept may be strange, but it has real results. You may not see superposition in your daily life, but it's always at work in the background. It happens in the particles that make up your body. It shapes how atoms bond, how light moves, and how devices work. You live in a world where the smallest pieces don't behave like the big ones. They don't follow common sense. They follow quantum rules. At the smallest level, the universe doesn't settle on one version of events until it must. It waits. It holds every possible outcome at once. It remains open. And when you finally look, when you measure, when you check, it picks one. You never know which one you'll get until you do. But until that moment, everything is possible. That's quantum superposition. You sit with an old friend and talk about a trip you took years ago. You both smile as you recall the same moment. Getting lost in the woods, the rain coming down, the way you both laughed and found shelter under a big tree. But then something odd happens. Your friend remembers a ranger showing you the way back. You remember finding the path yourselves. You both feel sure your version is right. You even remember how it felt. Still, only one of you could be correct. This kind of thing happens all the time. It feels like a minor disagreement, but it points to something deeper. Your memory is not solid. It doesn't store facts like a camera or a file on a computer. It changes, it rewrites itself, and you don't notice when it does. That's the memory illusion. Most people believe their memories are accurate. You think that what you remember really happened, just the way you remember it. But that's not true. Your brain doesn't keep perfect records. It stores bits and pieces. Then, when you recall a moment, your brain fills in the gaps. It rebuilds the memory. Each time you remember, you don't just pull up a copy, you edit it, sometimes without meaning to. Picture a puzzle with missing pieces. Your brain guesses what goes in the blank spots. It uses logic, experience, and outside information. That guess becomes part of the memory. The next time you remember the same event, that guess is already there. It feels just as real as the parts that were true. Over time, you don't remember what really happened. You remember what your brain rebuilt. This isn't a rare problem. Everyone does it. Even confident people with good focus and strong attention to detail fall for it. Studies show that eyewitnesses often give false statements. They don't lie on purpose. They feel sure they saw a red car when it was blue. They say the suspect wore a hat when he didn't. Their confidence makes it worse. We trust people who seem sure of what they saw, but memory doesn't work that way. One classic experiment shows how easy it is to change a memory. A group of people watched a video of a car crash. Then, researchers asked different groups one question: how fast was the car going when it hit the other vehicle? For another group, they changed one word. They asked, how fast was the car going when it smashed into the other vehicle? That one word changed the answer. People who heard smashed gave higher speeds. A week later, those same people were more likely to say they saw broken glass, even though there was none in the video. Their brains filled in a detail to match the story suggested by the word smashed. This shows how memory is shaped by words, feelings, and expectations. The memory itself didn't get weaker. It just changed to match a new version of the story. The people in the study weren't trying to fool anyone. They felt sure. They believed their memory had stayed the same. It hadn't. Other studies go further. Researchers have planted entire false memories. In one study, adults were told stories about events from childhood. Some were true, based on real family stories. One was false, a story about being lost in a shopping mall as a child. At first, most people said they didn't remember the fake event. But after hearing the story repeated, some started to remember it. They added details. They described how it felt. They recalled who helped them. These memories felt just as real as the true ones. Your brain wants to make sense of the world. It likes stories that feel complete. It doesn't like gaps or contradictions. When a memory is missing something, the brain fills it in. When a new detail fits well with the old ones, it gets added in without warning. You're not aware of this process. You just feel like you're remembering. But in reality, your brain is creating. Even small cues can cause big changes. A photo, a smell, or a word can shift what you remember. You might hear a story from someone else and later think it happened to you. You might mix two memories into one. If something happens repeatedly, like taking the same bus every morning, your brain saves the routine, not each trip. Later, if something strange happened one morning, you might forget which day it was or blend it into a different memory. Social interaction changes memory too. When you share stories with others, your version of the event can shift. If a group agrees on one version, individuals often adjust their memories to match. This can happen even when their first memory was different. The pressure to agree, even quietly, pushes the brain to revise, and once it's changed, the new version feels just as real. Emotion plays a role as well. Strong feelings make memories more vivid, but not more accurate. People often say they remember exactly where they were during a big event, like a natural disaster or a major news story. These are called flashbulb memories. They feel sharp and clear, but studies show they change just like any other memory. The details drift. People say they heard the news from the radio, then later say it was their phone. They switch the order of events. They leave people out, but they don't feel uncertain. The memories feel locked in, even when they're wrong. Memory distortion also grows over time. Each time you recall an event, You reshape it a little. You might forget one part and add another. The new version becomes the one you remember next time. After years, the final version might be very different from what really happened, but it still feels right. That's the trick your brain plays. You don't feel the edits. This illusion affects more than personal memories. It shapes your views about the world. You might feel certain about what a politician said, how a debate went, or what a teacher told you years ago. But those memories have been filtered, reshaped by new ideas, new information, and your current values. You don't notice the change. You trust the memory. You use it to guide your decisions. But it might not be what you think it is. Memory is useful. It lets you plan, learn, and stay safe. But it's not built for truth. It's built for function. Your brain needs stories that work, not records that are exact. It saves what you're likely to need. It smooths out confusion. It fills in missing pieces. That makes life easier. But it means you can't always trust what you remember, even when you feel certain. You remember what your brain gives you. Not the raw moment, but the version it chose. You don't get a copy of the past. You get a new draft each time, and it always feels like the truth. You walk into a room and see a chair. You know it's there because you see it. If you close your eyes, you still believe the chair exists. But what if that chair only takes its form because you are there to observe it? What if your mind plays a bigger role in shaping the world than you've been taught? This is the core idea behind biocentrism. It's a theory that says life and consciousness are not products of the universe. Instead, the universe depends on consciousness to exist at all. Most people grow up believing the opposite. You learn that the universe started with the Big Bang. Galaxies formed, stars lit up, planets cooled. At some point, on at least one of those planets, life appeared. After billions of years, humans evolved. We opened our eyes and began to understand the universe around us. In that view, life is a small, late event in a large old cosmos. But biocentrism says that's backward. It suggests that without conscious life to observe it, the universe doesn't take form. It may not even exist in any meaningful way. This idea comes from Robert Lanza, a biologist who looks at physics through the lens of life. He says we can't explain the universe fully unless we include consciousness in the equation. He points to strange results from quantum mechanics to support his view. One example is the double slit experiment. When scientists shoot tiny particles like electrons at a screen with two slits, they expect each particle to go through one slit or the other. But that's not what happens. Instead, the particles act like waves and go through both slits at once. They create an interference pattern, like ripples in water. This pattern only appears when no one measures which slit the particle goes through. The moment a detector is placed to see the path, the interference pattern disappears. The particle picks one slit. It acts like a single point, not a wave. This suggests that the act of observing changes the outcome. The measurement doesn't just tell us what happened, it causes a specific result to happen. Until someone looks, the particle exists in a state of possibilities. After someone looks, it settles into one state. That raises a strange question. Does something only become real when it is observed? Biocentrism says yes. It argues that space and time are tools the brain uses to make sense of the world. They are not out there on their own. Like smell or taste, they are ways we process experience. Without a conscious observer, these dimensions might not exist. In other words, the chair is there because your mind builds a model of the chair using data from your senses. The chair doesn't exist outside of that model, not as you know it. This idea pushes against the idea of an objective physical world. It doesn't say the world is imaginary. It says the world depends on observers to take form. The universe needs a mind to give it structure. Without minds, it has no shape, no color, no sound. Those things only happen when a living being interprets data. Imagine walking through a forest. You hear birds, you see green leaves, you smell the dirt, you feel the wind. Now remove all observers, no people, no animals, no insects. In a strict biocentric view, none of those sensations exist. The birds don't sing, the leaves have no color, the wind makes no sound. All of those features require a mind to give them meaning. Without a mind, there is no green, no song, no cold. There are only waves and particles, data with no interpretation. Critics argue that this makes the universe sound like a dream. But biocentrism doesn't deny that there's a world outside your head. It just says that what we call the world is a mix of raw input and mental processing. The mind doesn't create reality out of nothing, but it plays a central role in shaping how reality appears. The idea also changes how we think about time. We treat time like a river. It flows from past to future. We measure it with clocks. But in quantum mechanics, time doesn't behave in such a simple way. Equations that describe particles don't always include a clear direction for time. Some processes seem to go forward or backward. The passage of time, in that sense, could be a feature of experience, not an outside law. Biocentrism says time is not a container that events fall into. Instead, the brain arranges events in a sequence. That sequence gives us a sense of before and after. But the flow of time, like color and sound, may depend on the observer. Think about how dreams work. In a dream, you may move from place to place with no clear time gaps. You may see people who are long gone. You may feel that hours have passed, though only minutes have ticked by in the real world. The sense of time inside the dream is shaped by your mind. Waking life may be more stable, but according to biocentrism, the same principle applies. The brain builds time as part of the model it uses to understand experience. Some people ask, if the universe needs consciousness, what came first? Did life create the universe, or did the universe create life? In most scientific views, matter came first. Consciousness evolved much later. But biocentrism turns the question around. It says the universe arises in consciousness, not the other way around. This doesn't mean you personally create the world. It means that all experience, yours, mine, and everyone else's, comes from consciousness interpreting data. This idea changes how we think about death, too. If life shapes the universe and not the other way around, then what happens when a person dies? From a biocentric view, the consciousness that shaped their world doesn't simply stop. Since time and space are features of consciousness, death might not mean an end in the way we think. It might mean a change in the pattern of experience, not a full stop. Biocentrism doesn't claim to prove what happens after death, but it does say that the world we know, made of time, space, and objects, depends on the presence of life to appear that way. You can test this idea in small ways. Ask yourself, where is the world when you're not awake? In deep sleep, without dreams, time seems to vanish. Then you wake up and the world returns. It feels as though the world paused and resumed. That's just a feeling, but it points to something real. Consciousness is tied to experience. Without it, experience ends. And in the absence of experience, what is the universe? Biocentrism doesn't claim that nothing exists outside the mind. It says that reality as we know it, shaped by senses, arranged by thought, is only complete when observed. The universe is not an empty box waiting to be filled. It's a system that comes alive through the act of observation. Without a mind to see it, the sky has no blue. The music has no sound. The tree falling in the forest doesn't make a noise. It only makes waves. Sound, like space and time, only appears when life is there to give it shape. You stand outside on a clear night and look up at the stars. You see the moon, a few planets, and a sky full of stars stretching in every direction. You might think that's most of what's out there, but scientists say the part we can see is only a tiny slice. In fact, most of the universe is invisible. It doesn't shine or reflect light. We can't see it. We can't touch it, but we know it's there because of how it affects the things we can see. That invisible part falls into two categories: dark matter and dark energy. Dark matter makes up about 27% of the universe. It isn't the same as regular matter, which includes things like people, planets, and stars. Regular matter only accounts for about 5% of everything. The rest is dark energy, which makes up nearly 70%. Together, dark matter and dark energy form the bulk of the universe. And yet, we don't know what they are. We know they exist, but we don't know what they're made of. Let's start with dark matter. We can't see it, but we can see what it does. In the 1930s, a scientist named Fritz Zwicky looked at galaxies in a cluster. He noticed they were moving much faster than they should be. According to the laws of gravity, they should have flown apart. The visible mass, stars, gas, and dust, wasn't enough to hold them together. That meant something else had to be there. Something invisible with mass pulling things inward. That was the first clue. Later, other scientists looked at how stars move around inside galaxies. They found the same problem. Stars on the outer edges were moving just as fast as those near the center. That shouldn't happen. In our solar system, for example, the outer planets move more slowly than the ones close to the sun. That's how gravity works. But in galaxies, the speed stays flat. That suggests something surrounds the galaxy and adds extra pull. We call that something dark matter. One way to think of it is like wind. You can't see wind, but you can see trees sway, leaves blow, and waves rise. Dark matter works the same way. You don't see it, but you see its effect on other things. Dark matter doesn't shine, absorb light, or reflect it. That's why we call it dark. But it does have mass. It affects gravity. It shapes how galaxies form and how they move. Scientists have tried to find out what it's made of. They've come up with some ideas. One is that dark matter is made of particles we haven't detected yet. These might be called WIMPs, short for weakly interacting massive particles. If WIMPs exist, they pass through regular matter without much effect. That would explain why we haven't found them. There are other ideas too. Some scientists think dark matter might be made of very small black holes. Others look at particles called axions. None of these have been confirmed. Labs around the world are trying to detect dark matter directly. So far, no one has succeeded. Even though we haven't seen it, we can map where it is. One method uses something called gravitational lensing. That's when light from a distant object bends as it passes near something massive. If dark matter is present, it can bend light from a galaxy behind it. The light curves like a straw in a glass of water. By looking at how the light bends, scientists can figure out how much mass is there and where it's located. The mass doesn't match the visible matter, which shows that something invisible is present. Now think about the shape of the universe. Galaxies are not scattered randomly. They form patterns, clusters, filaments, and walls. Between them are huge gaps called voids. Dark matter helps form those patterns. Without it, galaxies wouldn't have enough gravity to stick together. They would be fewer and more spread out. Dark matter is like the scaffolding of the universe. It gives structure to the visible parts. Then there's dark energy. It's even stranger than dark matter. We didn't know it existed until the late 1990s. Scientists were studying supernova, exploding stars, and found that galaxies are moving away from each other faster than before. That was a surprise. Everyone thought the expansion of the universe was slowing down, pulled back by gravity. Instead, it's speeding up. That means something is pushing everything apart. That force is called dark energy. Dark energy doesn't act like regular energy. It doesn't come from matter or heat. It seems to be built into space itself. As the universe expands, more space means more dark energy. That creates more push, which causes faster expansion. It's like a runaway process. The more it grows, the faster it grows. We don't know what dark energy is made of. Some scientists think it might be linked to the energy of empty space. Others think it could come from a new field, like the ones we know from particle physics. Some even question whether we fully understand gravity. Maybe our equations are off at very large scales. What we do know is that dark energy is smooth. It doesn't clump or gather in certain spots. It fills space evenly. That makes it different from matter, which collects in stars, planets, and galaxies. Dark energy spreads out and works over large distances. It's not something we can detect in a lab or with local experiments, but we can see its effect on the universe as a whole. One way scientists study it is by looking at the cosmic microwave background. That's the afterglow of the Big Bang, a kind of fossil light. It carries information about how the universe started and how it's changing. By measuring tiny changes in that light, we can learn about the shape, speed, and age of the universe. Those measurements tell us how much dark matter and dark energy must be present to explain what we see. Another way is to look at the way galaxies are arranged across space. If dark energy pushes them apart, the patterns of their positions change over time. We can compare maps of galaxies from different distances and see how things have shifted. Despite all these clues, dark matter and dark energy remain mysteries. We see what they do, but we don't know what they are. They don't match anything in the periodic table. They don't fit with known particles. They make up more than 90% of the universe, and yet we can't touch, see, or build with them. Scientists keep looking. They build better detectors, study distant galaxies, and test new theories. They run simulations of how the universe would evolve with different types of dark matter and energy. The goal is to match those models with what we observe. The better the match, the closer we get to understanding the true nature of what's out there. Until then, most of the universe stays out of reach. It surrounds us and shapes our lives, but it doesn't show itself directly. We live in the middle of something vast and mostly invisible. The stars we see are like lights in the fog, bright, close, and clear, but only a small part of the whole. The rest is hidden, waiting to be understood. You watch a world leader on television giving a speech. Their voice is calm, their words are polished, their face looks serious and human. But then you read something online that says this person is not human at all. The post claims they are a reptilian, an alien being that can change shape to look human. Not just that one leader, but many others. The theory says presidents, prime ministers, royalty, and powerful business figures are part of a secret group. They are aliens in disguise. Their goal, according to the theory, is to control the world. This idea is known as the Reptilian Elite theory. It says that shape-shifting reptilian aliens have taken on human form and hold the highest positions in society. The claim is that they came to Earth from another star system, perhaps the Draco constellation. They look like large reptiles, tall, scaled, with slit pupils and claws. But they can hide all of that. They create the image of being human and use it to rise into power. The theory says they have ruled for thousands of years, hidden in plain sight. One of the main people who spread this theory is David Icke. He is a former sports broadcaster from the United Kingdom who began talking about reptilian aliens in the 1990s. He says these beings are part of a bloodline that connects many of the world's top leaders. He claims they feed on fear, create wars, and manipulate events from behind the scenes. He also says they belong to secret societies and use symbols, rituals, and coded language to communicate with each other. Supporters of the theory say that these reptilian beings have influenced human history for a long time. They believe ancient cultures left behind clues. Some point to old carvings from Mesopotamia, Egypt, or South America that show figures with snake-like heads or scaled skin. They say these are not myths or religious symbols. They believe they are accurate depictions of the reptilian race. In modern times, believers look for signs in video footage. They claim that glitches in news broadcasts or online videos sometimes show these beings losing control of their disguise. They say that if you pause a video at the right moment, you might see someone's eyes change shape or a brief flash of green skin. Sometimes they point to strange behavior during public events. If a leader acts cold or disconnected, they might say it's because that person is not human at all. Another piece of the theory says these beings have advanced technology. They don't just change shape, they can also read minds or control thoughts. They use this to guide the public, influence elections, and keep people focused on the wrong things. Some say they use media, education, and religion to keep the truth hidden. Believers also say that the reptilian elite are connected to secret organizations. These include the Illuminati, Freemasons, and other groups said to work behind the scenes. The idea is that the reptiles control the leaders, and the leaders control the rest of us. This forms a power structure that stays in place no matter who gets elected or what policies are passed. The system serves the reptiles, not the people. The theory claims that human leaders with reptilian bloodlines are trained from birth. They are taught how to act human, how to fit in, and how to rise to power. Some say the British royal family is part of this group. Others name presidents, prime ministers, media executives, and celebrities. These people are not always aware of their reptilian nature, according to the theory. Some might be fully conscious of who they are. Others might be under mind control or in a state of partial awareness. There are also claims that these beings live in underground bases. Some say there are tunnels beneath cities, military sites, and national parks. These tunnels lead to hidden chambers where reptilians gather. Some stories even say that governments know about them and work with them. They trade resources or technology in exchange for power. These parts of the theory often sound like science fiction, but for some, the belief runs deep. People who believe in the reptilian elite often say that the world feels fake. They see problems that never get solved, wars that seem pointless, and leaders who lie. They start to think there must be something else going on, something bigger. The reptilian theory gives them an answer. It says, you feel like the world is being controlled, because it is. The theory tries to explain a lot of things. Why do some families seem to hold power for generations? Why do major news outlets repeat the same stories? Why do political parties often seem more alike than different? The reptilian theory says this is all by design. It says that the real fight is not between left and right, but between humans and reptiles pretending to be human. There's also a spiritual side to the theory. Some believers say the reptilians are not just aliens, but beings from another dimension. They operate at a higher or lower frequency, and most people cannot see them. Only those who are awake or tuned into the right state of mind can detect them. This makes the theory harder to prove or disprove. If you say you don't see them, a believer might respond, that's because you're not aware yet. The theory uses fear as fuel. When people feel powerless, they look for an explanation. When events don't make sense, they search for patterns. If a disaster happens or a major policy shift, some people look for hidden motives. If they already believe in the reptilian elite, it's easy to say, this is their doing. Still, others treat the theory like a story, not a belief. Some use it as a metaphor. They say the reptiles stand for cold, unfeeling power, the kind that lies, manipulates, and feeds on people's pain. In this view, you don't need literal aliens for the idea to make sense. The reptile becomes a symbol of the parts of power that feel inhuman. Whether taken literally or not, the theory spreads in forums, videos, and podcasts. It mixes real concerns, corruption, secrecy, injustice, with wild claims. That blend gives it strength. People who don't trust official stories find comfort in an alternate one. The reptilian elite theory offers a big answer to big questions. It says, this is why things feel wrong. This is who's really in charge. The power of the theory lies not in proof, but in the feeling it creates. A sense that there is more to the world than what we see. A sense that behind every polished speech and formal photo, there might be something cold, ancient, and hidden. And if enough people believe it, the theory stays alive, no matter what's true. You walk across the ground, fly over mountains, or sail across the sea. You believe the earth under you is solid. You trust the world has a hot core at the center, as science teaches. You may have seen diagrams in school showing the crust, the mantle, the outer core, and the inner core. You've never questioned it. Most people don't. But there's another idea, one that goes back centuries. It says the earth is not solid all the way through. It says the planet is hollow, and that inside, hidden from view, entire civilizations may exist. This is the hollow earth theory. It claims that under our feet, deep within the planet, there may be vast open spaces, huge cavities that could hold life. Some versions of the theory go further. They say entire cities or even continents exist inside. Some say advanced beings live there, untouched by surface life. Others say these beings may have come from ancient times or even another planet. The idea is not new. In the late 1600s, a man named Edmund Halley, best known for Halley's Comet, suggested that the Earth might be made of several shells, one inside the other, with spaces between them. He proposed this as a way to explain strange compass readings. He thought that magnetic poles might shift due to movements inside these layers. He did not claim there were people living inside, but he opened the door for others to take the idea further. Over the next few centuries, writers and explorers took up the idea. In 1818, a man named John Cleves Sims Jr. said that the Earth was hollow and open at the poles. He claimed that openings, called polar holes, allowed access to the inner world. He even asked the US government to fund an expedition to the North Pole to find one. The expedition never happened, but the idea gained followers. In time, stories began to form around what might live inside. Some said ancient people, like the lost tribes of Israel or survivors from Atlantis, had gone underground long ago. Others said the inner Earth was home to non-human beings, perhaps more advanced than us. These stories describe great underground cities with bright lights, clean air, and perfect weather. Some say the light comes from a small inner sun at the center of the hollow Earth. One of the most famous stories connected to this idea is that of Admiral Richard Byrd, a real-life U.S. Navy officer and polar explorer. In the 1940s and 1950s, Byrd led missions to the Arctic and Antarctic. Some people claim that Byrd flew into one of the polar holes during a secret mission and entered the inner world. They say he saw green land where there should have been ice. They say he met tall, peaceful beings who warned him about surface humanity's path toward war. Byrd did not say this in public, but a supposed diary appeared years later that described such a journey. Most experts say the diary is fake. Still, many believers point to it as evidence. The theory continues to live on. People look at maps and ask why there are restricted zones near the poles. They note that flights over the Arctic and Antarctic are rare or limited. They ask why satellite images show strange blurs or blank spots near the poles. They claim these are not glitches, but efforts to hide something. Supporters also point to caves. They note that deep cave systems exist across the planet, some unexplored. They ask if these systems might lead to something more. They mention stories from around the world about people or beings who live underground. In Native American legends, in Tibetan texts, and in Norse myths, there are tales of inner lands. These places are often linked to peace, wisdom, and long life. Some people tie the hollow Earth idea to UFOs. They say that flying objects seen entering volcanoes or disappearing into oceans may not be coming from space, but from inside the planet. They suggest that advanced inner Earth civilizations may have their own aircraft, unknown to us. The theory also challenges what we know about the Earth's structure. Mainstream science says we have measured the inside of the Earth using seismic waves from earthquakes. These waves move at different speeds depending on the material they pass through. That's how scientists infer the layers. But Hollow Earth supporters argue that this method assumes certain facts from the start. They ask how we can be sure of what lies so deep when we've never dug more than a few miles down. The deepest hole ever drilled, the Kola superdeep borehole in Russia, reached about 7.6 miles. That's a scratch on the surface of a planet that is almost 8,000 miles wide. Beyond that depth, we rely on indirect evidence. Hollow Earth theorists use this to say the truth might still be hidden. There are different versions of the theory. Some say the entire Earth is hollow, with a shell just a few hundred miles thick. Others say there are large pockets or hollow zones inside a mostly solid Earth. Still others say the Earth has tunnels that connect the outer world to inner spaces. These tunnels might be natural or made by ancient builders. A few modern groups claim to have contact with beings from inside the Earth. They describe these beings as tall, healthy, and spiritually advanced. They say the inner people live longer, avoid war, and use clean energy. Some claim these beings want to help surface humans if we can overcome our violent nature. There is no scientific proof that the Earth is hollow. Mainstream geology rejects the idea, but the theory stays alive in books, online forums, and personal stories. It draws in people who feel that what we've been told is incomplete. It appeals to those who sense that more might be going on beneath the surface, literally and figuratively. The Hollow Earth theory gives people a way to explain mystery. It offers a hidden world, untouched by modern life, where other rules may apply. Whether taken literally or as a metaphor, it challenges the view that what we see is all there is. It says there might be more beneath our feet than we think, and it keeps people looking down, wondering what lies below the ground they walk on every day. You walk down a dock and see an old wooden ship tied to the pier. The plaque says it's the ship of Theseus, a famous vessel from long ago. People have cared for this ship over the years. When a plank rotted, they replaced it. When a mast cracked, they swapped it out. Bit by bit, every piece has been changed. None of the original wood is left. Still, the plaque calls it the same ship. You stand there and ask yourself, is it? That's the ship of Theseus problem. It's a thought experiment that asks what it means for something to stay the same over time. If you change all the parts of an object, is it still the same object? If not, when did it stop being that object? This isn't just a question about ships. It's about identity, what it means to stay yourself as time goes on, even as you change. You can apply the same idea to your body. When you were a baby, your body was small and soft. As you grew, your cells divided and replaced themselves. Your bones stretched, your skin thickened, your brain developed. The cells you were born with are mostly gone. Most of the cells in your body are different from the ones you had 10 years ago. So if almost everything about your body has changed, are you still you? Some say yes. They argue that the pattern matters more than the parts. In this view, you are not the exact material you're made from. You are the structure, the way your parts fit together and work as a whole. When a ship replaces its planks one by one, the pattern remains the same. It still floats the same way. It still has the same shape. If it looks like the ship of Theseus, acts like the ship of Theseus, and has the same history, then it is. Others disagree. They say that if none of the original material remains, then it's no longer the same thing. A copy of a ship is not the original ship, even if it looks and works the same. If someone builds a second ship with all the old parts that were removed, now there are two ships. One made of old parts, one made of new. Which one is the real ship of Theseus? The one that stayed in the harbor, or the one built from the original wood? Now think about your own identity again. Imagine you lose a memory from childhood. Then imagine you forget an old habit. You pick up new hobbies. Your values shift. Your views change. Over time, you don't just change physically, you change mentally too. So are you still the same person? Let's say someone knew you in high school and meets you now. They say you've changed. You think they're right. You dress differently. You speak differently. You think about things you didn't care about before, but you still feel like you. You remember your past. You carry the same name. You walk through life with the same awareness. That feeling of continuity is what many people use to define identity. But memory can fail too. People with brain injuries sometimes forget large parts of their lives. In extreme cases, they lose all personal memories. Some don't recognize their families or even their own names. If you woke up tomorrow with no memory of your past, would you still be you? You'd have the same body, but your thoughts and feelings would be new. In that case, is identity in the body or in the mind? There's also the question of personality. Your habits, your fears, your goals. They all form part of who you are. But these can change. People recover from trauma. They shift from angry to calm, from selfish to generous. After enough change, others may say, "You're a different person now." That's usually a figure of speech, but it gets close to the ship of Theseus problem. How much change does it take before you're no longer the same? Now imagine something stranger. Suppose scientists could copy your mind. They scan your brain, capture every detail, and upload it into a computer. The digital version thinks like you, talks like you, and remembers what you remember. It even believes it's you. But your body still exists. There are now two of you. Which one is the real you? Or think about teleportation. Some science fiction stories describe a machine that breaks down your body, sends the information to another place, and rebuilds you from new matter. If it works, you appear somewhere else with all your memories and traits. But what if the original you isn't destroyed? Now two of you exist again. If your body is gone, but the copy goes on, is that still you? Or did the real you die, and a copy took your place? These questions show that identity is not simple. It's not only about the body, or only about the mind. It might be a mix of many things: memory, personality, awareness, physical continuity, and how others see you. The ship of Theseus puts all these ideas to the test. It asks whether identity is a label we place on a changing object, or a real, fixed thing that stays the same no matter what. Some people turn to legal or social rules to answer this. In law, you are the same person, even if you lose your memory or replace your organs. You keep your name, your rights, and your responsibilities. Socially, others treat you as the same person unless something extreme happens. So even if you change in big ways, society still sees you as one continuous self. But philosophy doesn't stop there. It keeps asking, what does it mean to be you? Are you a stream of experiences, always moving forward but always linked to the past? Or are you a collection of changing parts that happen to be in one place for now? Imagine a river. The water flows. The shape of the river shifts over time. It floods, it dries, it moves its banks, but we still call it the same river. Is that because of the name, the place, the path it takes? Maybe the same is true of people. You're a changing flow, never exactly the same, never completely different. The ship of Theseus may be about a ship, but it's really about you. about the idea that even when every part of you changes, there may still be something that holds it all together. Something that makes you feel like you are still you, no matter how much time passes. Maybe that's memory. Maybe it's consciousness. Maybe it's just habit. But whatever it is, the question remains, if every piece changes, what's left? What stays the same? And is that enough to call it you? You sit down, turn on a screen, and instead of watching a movie or live news, you see the past unfold in front of you. Not a recreation, not a guess. The real thing, as it actually happened. You watch Julius Caesar walk through Rome. You see Jesus deliver a sermon. You hear Lincoln speak at Gettysburg. You're not imagining it or watching actors. You're seeing and hearing actual events from long ago, captured and displayed in real time. That's the idea behind the Chronovisor. The Chronovisor is said to be a machine that lets someone view scenes from the past. Not in the way we use history books or paintings, but directly, like watching footage through a television set. The device would pick up energy or frequencies left behind by past events and convert them into images and sound. With it, a person could witness moments in history exactly as they happened. The story of the Chronovisor begins with a man named Father Pellegrino Ernetti. He was a Benedictine monk and also a physicist. In the 1950s and 1960s, he claimed to be part of a team that built a machine capable of seeing into the past. According to him, the device was a kind of time viewer, not a time machine. It didn't transport people back in time, but it allowed them to watch past events as if they were still happening. Ernetti said the team included other scientists, some of whom had backgrounds in electronics and particle physics. One name often mentioned is Enrico Fermi, a real and well-respected physicist. Ernetti described the machine as having antennas, dials, and a screen. It was said to detect and decode traces of electromagnetic radiation and sound waves that past events left behind. These traces, according to the theory, never fully disappear. They stay in the environment, like echoes or imprints. The Chronovisor would find these signals and turn them into a clear visual and audio display. In other words, the idea assumes the past is still out there, waiting to be tuned in like a forgotten radio station. The machine doesn't change the past or interact with it. It only views it. Supporters of the story claim that the Chronovisor worked by picking up residual energy, sort of like a scientific version of a psychic vision, but using hardware and math instead of intuition or magic. Ernetti said the team used the Chronovisor to witness major historical events. One of the most dramatic claims is that they viewed the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. He also said they saw ancient Rome during its height, listened to lost speeches by emperors, and even recovered a full version of a lost Latin play called Thyestes by the poet Quintus Ennius. Ernetti provided a typed version of the play and said it came straight from viewing it on the Chronovisor. He also shared a photo, supposedly showing Jesus on the cross, taken directly from the screen of the device. That image later turned out to match a known statue in an Italian church, which led many people to dismiss the story. Critics said the photo was fake and the play may have been made up. Ernetti later signed a statement denying the whole story, but supporters claim he was pressured to do so. The idea of the Chronovisor continues to attract interest because it mixes religion, science, and secrecy. People wonder if such a device could exist and what it would mean if it did. If someone could actually see the past, it would change how we understand history. There would be no need to guess or argue over details. You could watch events unfold directly. That would affect religion, politics, education, and more. Imagine watching the signing of the Declaration of Independence, not reading about it or seeing a painting, but watching the real people, hearing their voices, noticing their expressions. Now imagine watching a relative from generations ago. You'd see where they lived, how they spoke, what they wore. The device wouldn't just change what we know, it would change what we feel about history. It would make the past personal and immediate. The story also raises questions about how memory and time work. Most science today says time moves in one direction. Events happen, then fade. But the idea of the Chronovisor assumes the past doesn't vanish. It stays, somehow stored in the fabric of space or the vibrations of the universe. If that's true, the implications go beyond history. It could mean everything that ever happened is still accessible under the right conditions. In theory, we already know that events leave traces. For example, when light reflects off objects, it carries information. When sound travels through air, it creates vibrations. Some scientists have explored the idea that particles or fields might hold a record of past interactions. But there's no working model or accepted science that proves these traces can be collected and turned into a visual feed. Still, the idea taps into something deep. We all want to know what really happened before we were here. History books tell stories, but they depend on the writer, the source, the time. They have limits. A device that bypasses all of that and shows the raw past would be a powerful tool. But it would also raise risks. If people could watch anything from history, what would they choose? Would they look for personal truth or use it for power? Could someone spy on private lives from the past? Would the device have rules? Who would control it? If it fell into the wrong hands, it could be used to manipulate, blackmail, or dig up secrets that people meant to leave behind. Some versions of the story say the Vatican took control of the Chronovisor and now keeps it hidden. According to these accounts, the device was dismantled or locked away because it was too dangerous. It showed too much. If real, it could prove or disprove key moments in religious texts. It could settle debates in ways that would shake belief systems. That idea makes the story even more attractive to conspiracy theorists, people who believe powerful groups hide knowledge from the public. Even though most scientists reject the story as fiction, the concept keeps coming back. It shows up in books, TV shows, and internet forums. People like to imagine that the truth is out there, somewhere, waiting to be viewed. Whether that truth is about the past or about the people who claim to control such devices doesn't always matter. The appeal is in the idea itself, that nothing is ever really lost. If the Chronovisor did exist, it would not be a time machine in the usual sense. You wouldn't walk into the past or talk to anyone. You'd only watch. You'd be a silent observer. But even that much would change everything. It would bring history into the present. It would make long ago moments visible, real, and harder to deny. Whether or not the machine ever existed, the story shows how strong the need is to see the past with our own eyes, not just to believe, but to witness. You wake up one morning and decide what to wear. You stand in front of the closet and choose between a blue shirt and a red one. You pick the red shirt and move on with your day. That's the end of the decision. At least that's how most people see it. But the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics says something very different. According to this idea, you picked both shirts. You just don't know it. The many worlds interpretation, often shortened to MWI, says that every time a quantum event can have more than one outcome, all of those outcomes happen. Each one occurs in its own separate branch of the universe. These branches don't affect each other. They go on existing in parallel, each with its own version of events. In one world, you wore the red shirt. In another, you chose the blue. This theory comes from quantum mechanics. That's the branch of physics that studies how very small particles, like electrons, photons, and atoms, behave. At that tiny scale, things get strange. A particle doesn't have a fixed position until someone measures it. Until then, it exists in a state called superposition. That means it holds more than one value at once. For example, an electron can spin both up and down at the same time. In traditional quantum theory, when you measure a particle, the wave function collapses. The wave function is a mathematical tool that shows all the possible outcomes. Collapse means the particle picks one outcome and the others vanish. This is what most people are taught. It's how we explain why we see definite results in experiments. But the many worlds interpretation says the wave function never collapses. Instead, it splits. Each possible result happens, and the universe divides into separate branches for each one. You only see one outcome because you are in just one branch. But the other branches still exist. They contain other versions of you, each seeing a different result. To understand this better, imagine flipping a coin. In our everyday world, the coin lands heads or tails. You watch it fall, and you see one side. That's the end. But in MWI, when the coin flips, the universe splits. In one universe, the coin lands heads. In another, it lands tails. You go on living in both, but each version of you only remembers seeing one result. It might sound like science fiction, but it comes from trying to make sense of real experiments. One common example is the double-slit experiment. When particles like electrons are sent toward a barrier with two slits and no one watches which slit they go through, the particles behave like waves. They go through both slits and interfere with themselves. This creates a pattern of light and dark stripes on the wall behind the slits. But when someone tries to observe which slit the particle goes through, the pattern changes. Now the electrons act like particles. They go through one slit or the other, not both. Most explanations say that watching the particle causes the wave function to collapse into one result. But that raises problems. What counts as watching? Is it the eye of a person, a camera, a sensor? And why should observation cause such a major change in behavior? The many worlds interpretation avoids this issue. It says the wave function doesn't collapse. Instead, the universe branches. In one branch, the particle went through the left slit. In another, it went through the right. Both versions of the experimenter continue in their own worlds, each seeing a different path. The interference pattern isn't visible anymore because the two branches can't talk to each other. Once the particle takes a path in one branch, it doesn't affect the other path in the other branch. MWI treats the wave function as real, not just a tool to calculate probabilities, but a full picture of what exists. Every time there is a quantum event with more than one outcome, the universe splits. This doesn't happen just with particles in a lab. It happens constantly. Every interaction, every decision, every random event leads to a branching of worlds. Suppose you're driving and come to a fork in the road. You decide to go left. According to MWI, there's a branch where you went right. Both paths exist. There's a version of you taking each one. You don't feel the split because your memory only follows one branch. But the other version of you still exists and continues in a world that followed a different path. Some people ask, if the universe is always splitting, why don't we see or feel it? The answer lies in a concept called decoherence. When quantum systems interact with large environments, like air, heat, or other people, they lose their quantum behavior. The branches become separate and can't affect each other. That's why you don't notice the other yous. They are cut off from your world. You can't reach them, and they can't reach you. This idea also applies to things like quantum computing. A quantum computer holds qubits, which can exist in superposition. That means they can hold both 0 and 1 at the same time. When a quantum computer runs a program, it explores many paths at once. MWI says this works because each branch of the universe follows a different path of the calculation. The result we get is one of those paths, chosen from the many. Many worlds sounds like it creates infinite versions of reality. That's true. But it doesn't require new matter or energy to appear from nowhere. The total structure of the universe includes all the branches already. We only experience one at a time. Some people try to use this theory to explain odd events. Say you lose your keys and search for them everywhere. Later, you find them in a place you already checked. That could be due to a shift in focus or memory. But a fan of MWI might joke that you shifted to a branch where the keys were in a different spot. The theory can't be used to explain everything, but it does give a new way to think about reality. People also wonder what this means for free will. If every choice creates a branch, then every possible version of your life already exists. Some see that as taking away freedom. Others see it as freeing. No matter what happens, somewhere, another version of you made the other choice. Every path gets taken. Every outcome plays out. The many worlds interpretation doesn't predict new results. It explains the same experiments as other theories do, but it does so without wave function collapse or special roles for observation. That's why some physicists prefer it. It sticks to the math and treats everything as part of one big structure. You may never meet the other versions of yourself. You may never see those other branches. But according to this view of reality, they're still out there. Every time a coin flips, a particle moves, or a decision gets made. Every possible outcome doesn't just could happen, it does. Just not in your branch. You walk into a coffee shop and decide between a latte and black coffee. You pick the lot. It feels like your choice. You weighed your options, maybe thought about taste or price and made a decision. But what if you didn't actually choose? What if everything leading up to that moment, your taste, your mood, your past experience had already set the result? What if the laws of physics decided for you before you even thought about it? That's what determinism says. Determinism is the idea that every event has a cause, and those causes go back in a chain, all the way to the beginning of time. In a deterministic universe, everything that happens is the result of what came before. Every drop of rain, every heartbeat, every word spoken, all of it flows from prior conditions and fixed laws. Your brain is made of matter. It follows the same physical rules as everything else. If those rules are strict and unbreakable, then your thoughts, decisions, and actions are also part of the chain. Think of a row of dominoes. You knock over the first one and the rest fall in order. You don't need to touch each domino. The energy passes through the line and each one falls because the one before it did. Determinism says the universe works the same way. One moment leads to the next and so on. If you knew the state of everything, the position and speed of every particle, you could, in theory, predict everything that will ever happen. That includes human behavior. Suppose you lose your temper. You might say, "I couldn't help it." Under determinism, that's exactly right. Your mood, your stress level, your memories, and your brain chemistry all came together to produce that outburst. You didn't choose it in a vacuum. You couldn't have done anything else, because every part of you was shaped by causes you didn't control. This view goes back centuries. Philosophers like Spinoza and Laplace believed in a mechanical universe. Laplace imagined a superintelligence that knew all the forces and positions of particles in the universe. He said such an intelligence, sometimes called Laplace's demon, could calculate the future with perfect accuracy. Nothing would be uncertain. Nothing would be random. Every outcome would be known, including your actions. But most people don't live like that's true. You feel like you make real choices. You hold others responsible for what they do. You reward people for kindness. You punish them for harm. All of this relies on the idea that people could have acted differently. That's where free will comes in. Free will says that people can make real choices, that they are not just acting out a script written by physics. There are different ways to define free will. Some say it means you could have done otherwise. If you chose tea over coffee, you could have picked the other one, and nothing forced your hand. Others say free will is about being the author of your actions. Even if your brain has causes behind it, if the decision comes from you, from your own thoughts and values, then it's free. This creates a conflict. If determinism is true, then every thought and action has a cause outside of your control. But if free will is true, then you must be able to break from that chain. How can both be right? Some people try to resolve the conflict by saying determinism and free will can work together. This view is called compatibilism. It says that freedom doesn't mean total randomness or lack of cause. It means acting in line with your own reasons, without being forced by something outside of you. A compatibilist would say that even if your brain follows physical laws, you still act freely when your actions come from your own desires and beliefs. Others reject that idea. They say real freedom means being able to step outside the chain of cause and effect. That means your decisions can't just be the result of brain chemistry or past experience. They must come from something extra, something not bound by physics. Some people call this the soul or consciousness. But that raises questions. If you're not shaped by the world, where do your choices come from? Are they random? Are they caused by something else we don't understand yet? Quantum mechanics enters the picture here. In the world of very small particles, outcomes are not always predictable. A particle might act one way or another, even when the setup is the same. Some people say this randomness could create room for free will. If not everything is fixed, maybe your brain could tip one way or the other without being fully determined. But randomness doesn't solve the problem. If your decisions are random, that's not freedom either. A coin flip isn't a choice, so if free will exists, it must be something more than either pure cause or pure chance. It must involve a way for the mind to guide action without being fully trapped by the past or ruled by luck. This debate touches everyday life. When someone commits a crime, we judge them as responsible. That judgment makes sense if they acted freely. But if their actions were caused by brain chemistry, childhood trauma, or genetics, is blame still fair? Some legal systems already account for this. A person found to be mentally unfit might not be punished the same way. But most people still act as though choice matters, as though responsibility is real. Science adds to the debate. In some studies, scientists have looked at brain activity during decision-making. In a famous experiment, participants were asked to press a button whenever they felt like it. Their brain activity was measured. In many cases, the brain showed signs of preparing the movement before the person reported deciding to act. Some took this as proof that the brain makes decisions before the person becomes aware of them. If that's true, then your sense of choosing might be an illusion. Your body acts first, and your mind catches up. Others argue that these experiments don't show much. Pressing a button at random is not the same as making a real-life choice. In more serious decisions, like changing careers or ending a relationship, people reflect and weigh options. That process seems harder to reduce to a quick brain signal. So while the science raises good questions, it doesn't settle the issue. The discussion also matters in how we see ourselves. If you believe in free will, you may feel pride or guilt more deeply. You take ownership of your actions. You think of your life as something you build through your own effort. If you believe in determinism, you might feel more compassion for others. You may see mistakes not as moral failings, but as results of hard circumstances. You may focus less on blame and more on understanding. Still, the feeling of choice is strong. When you stand at a crossroads, literal or not, you feel like your action matters. You weigh one path against another. You try to pick well. Even if the choice was shaped by your past, it feels like it belongs to you. Maybe that's the best we can do. Maybe the experience of choosing, even if not fully free, is still real in a way that shapes how we live. Maybe it matters that you paused, thought, and then reached for the latte. Even if physics had already decided, it still felt like your hand. And maybe that feeling is what keeps the question alive. You walk into a coffee shop and decide between a latte and black coffee. You pick the lot. It feels like your choice. You weighed your options, maybe thought about taste or price and made a decision. But what if you didn't actually choose? What if everything leading up to that moment, your taste, your mood, your past experience had already set the result? What if the laws of physics decided for you before you even thought about it? That's what determinism says. Determinism is the idea that every event has a cause, and those causes go back in a chain, all the way to the beginning of time. In a deterministic universe, everything that happens is the result of what came before. Every drop of rain, every heartbeat, every word spoken, all of it flows from prior conditions and fixed laws. Your brain is made of matter. It follows the same physical rules as everything else. If those rules are strict and unbreakable, then your thoughts, decisions, and actions are also part of the chain. Think of a row of dominoes. You knock over the first one and the rest fall in order. You don't need to touch each domino. The energy passes through the line and each one falls because the one before it did. Determinism says the universe works the same way. One moment leads to the next and so on. If you knew the state of everything, the position and speed of every particle, you could, in theory, predict everything that will ever happen. That includes human behavior. Suppose you lose your temper. You might say, "I couldn't help it." Under determinism, that's exactly right. Your mood, your stress level, your memories, and your brain chemistry all came together to produce that outburst. You didn't choose it in a vacuum. You couldn't have done anything else, because every part of you was shaped by causes you didn't control. This view goes back centuries. Philosophers like Spinoza and Laplace believed in a mechanical universe. Laplace imagined a superintelligence that knew all the forces and positions of particles in the universe. He said such an intelligence, sometimes called Laplace's demon, could calculate the future with perfect accuracy. Nothing would be uncertain. Nothing would be random. Every outcome would be known, including your actions. But most people don't live like that's true. You feel like you make real choices. You hold others responsible for what they do. You reward people for kindness. You punish them for harm. All of this relies on the idea that people could have acted differently. That's where free will comes in. Free will says that people can make real choices, that they are not just acting out a script written by physics. There are different ways to define free will. Some say it means you could have done otherwise. If you chose tea over coffee, you could have picked the other one, and nothing forced your hand. Others say free will is about being the author of your actions. Even if your brain has causes behind it, if the decision comes from you, from your own thoughts and values, then it's free. This creates a conflict. If determinism is true, then every thought and action has a cause outside of your control. But if free will is true, then you must be able to break from that chain. How can both be right? Some people try to resolve the conflict by saying determinism and free will can work together. This view is called compatibilism. It says that freedom doesn't mean total randomness or lack of cause. It means acting in line with your own reasons, without being forced by something outside of you. A compatibilist would say that even if your brain follows physical laws, you still act freely when your actions come from your own desires and beliefs. Others reject that idea. They say real freedom means being able to step outside the chain of cause and effect. That means your decisions can't just be the result of brain chemistry or past experience. They must come from something extra, something not bound by physics. Some people call this the soul or consciousness. But that raises questions. If you're not shaped by the world, where do your choices come from? Are they random? Are they caused by something else we don't understand yet? Quantum mechanics enters the picture here. In the world of very small particles, outcomes are not always predictable. A particle might act one way or another, even when the setup is the same. Some people say this randomness could create room for free will. If not everything is fixed, maybe your brain could tip one way or the other without being fully determined. But randomness doesn't solve the problem. If your decisions are random, that's not freedom either. A coin flip isn't a choice, so if free will exists, it must be something more than either pure cause or pure chance. It must involve a way for the mind to guide action without being fully trapped by the past or ruled by luck. This debate touches everyday life. When someone commits a crime, we judge them as responsible. That judgment makes sense if they acted freely. But if their actions were caused by brain chemistry, childhood trauma, or genetics, is blame still fair? Some legal systems already account for this. A person found to be mentally unfit might not be punished the same way. But most people still act as though choice matters, as though responsibility is real. Science adds to the debate. In some studies, scientists have looked at brain activity during decision-making. In a famous experiment, participants were asked to press a button whenever they felt like it. Their brain activity was measured. In many cases, the brain showed signs of preparing the movement before the person reported deciding to act. Some took this as proof that the brain makes decisions before the person becomes aware of them. If that's true, then your sense of choosing might be an illusion. Your body acts first, and your mind catches up. Others argue that these experiments don't show much. Pressing a button at random is not the same as making a real-life choice. In more serious decisions, like changing careers or ending a relationship, people reflect and weigh options. That process seems harder to reduce to a quick brain signal. So while the science raises good questions, it doesn't settle the issue. The discussion also matters in how we see ourselves. If you believe in free will, you may feel pride or guilt more deeply. You take ownership of your actions. You think of your life as something you build through your own effort. If you believe in determinism, you might feel more compassion for others. You may see mistakes not as moral failings, but as results of hard circumstances. You may focus less on blame and more on understanding. Still, the feeling of choice is strong. When you stand at a crossroads, literal or not, you feel like your action matters. You weigh one path against another. You try to pick well. Even if the choice was shaped by your past, it feels like it belongs to you. Maybe that's the best we can do. Maybe the experience of choosing, even if not fully free, is still real in a way that shapes how we live. Maybe it matters that you paused, thought, and then reached for the latte. Even if physics had already decided, it still felt like your hand. And maybe that feeling is what keeps the question alive. You reach out and touch a table. It feels solid. You knock on it and it makes a sound. You believe it's real. made of atoms, sitting in space, just like everything else. You look around the room and assume the space you're in, the 3 dimensions you move through, are exactly what they seem. But some physicists say this may not be true. They argue that what you experience as 3-dimensional space might be a kind of projection. The table, the room, the entire universe could be a shadow cast from something deeper and simpler. This is the core idea behind the holographic principle. The name comes from the way holograms work. A hologram is a flat, 2-dimensional surface that holds the information to make a 3D image. When light hits it the right way, the image looks 3-dimensional, even though it's not. You move your head around, and the image shifts like a real object would, but the actual data is all on the surface. The holographic principle says something similar might be true for our universe. It says that everything we see, every object, every event, every force, might come from information stored on a distant surface. That surface would be far away, possibly on the edge of the universe, and only 2-dimensional. Yet the world we live in would still feel fully 3-dimensional to us. This idea doesn't come from science fiction. It comes from trying to understand black holes. A black hole is a region of space where gravity is so strong that not even light can escape. When something falls into a black hole, it seems to vanish. But that creates a problem. The laws of physics say information should never be lost. If you know the state of a system now, you should be able to figure out what it was before. But when something crosses the edge of a black hole, that information seems gone for good. In the 1970s, physicist Stephen Hawking made the problem worse. He showed that black holes slowly lose mass over time. They emit tiny amounts of radiation, now called Hawking radiation. If a black hole evaporates completely, where does the information go? It can't just disappear. That would break the rules of quantum mechanics. So scientists searched for a way to explain what happens to the information. One clue came from looking at the surface area of a black hole. You'd think that the information inside a black hole would depend on its volume, how much stuff it holds. But calculations showed the opposite. The maximum amount of information a black hole can contain depends only on the area of its surface, not its volume. This was strange. It was as if the 3-dimensional contents of the black hole could be described entirely by data on its 2-dimensional boundary. Physicists Gerard Hooft and Leonard Susskind took this idea further. They proposed that maybe this surface-based description isn't just true for black holes. Maybe it applies to the whole universe. Maybe everything that happens inside a region of space can be described by information on its boundary. That's the holographic principle. It says that the true description of a volume of space may live on a surface 1 dimension lower. To make this more concrete, imagine a cylinder. It has volume. You can move up, down, forward, and back inside it. Now imagine the cylinder is like our universe. According to the holographic principle, everything inside the cylinder, the stars, the planets, your thoughts, could be described by data written on the outer surface of the cylinder. You don't live on that surface. You live inside, but your reality might still be shaped by what's written out there. This idea gained strength in 1997 when physicist Juan Maldacena made a breakthrough. He showed that a certain kind of gravity-filled universe could be exactly described by a different kind of theory that lives on its boundary and has no gravity at all. In this model, one world has 3 dimensions, plus time and gravity, while the other has only 2 dimensions, plus time and no gravity. Yet both are complete and equal descriptions of the same physics. It was like finding 2 languages that say the same thing in different ways. This model is highly technical and doesn't match the universe we live in exactly. But it showed that the holographic principle could work in practice. It gave scientists a way to test and explore the idea using known math. Since then, researchers have found more examples where the principle might apply. It has become a serious tool in theoretical physics, especially in efforts to connect quantum mechanics with gravity. What does it mean for everyday experience? If the principle is true in our universe, then the space around you may not be fundamental. It may be an emergent property, something that appears when lots of simpler things work together. Think of temperature. A single atom doesn't have a temperature. But when you have a bunch of atoms moving around, the average motion becomes what we call heat. Space and gravity might be like that. They might come from patterns in information stored on a lower dimensional boundary. That doesn't mean space is fake. Just like a hologram still gives you a real image, your experience of the world would still feel real. You would still move through rooms, pick up objects, and interact with people. But at the deepest level, what you think of as here might be tied to data on a faraway surface. In that view, the universe isn't just vast and curved, it's also encoded. You might ask, if reality is a projection, where is the projector? What counts as the surface? These questions are still open. In some models, the edge of the universe is just a mathematical limit. In others, it's a physical horizon we can't reach. What matters is that the math works. If a full description of your world can be written on a flat sheet somewhere else, then it challenges what it means for something to be real. This idea also connects to black holes in a new way. If the holographic principle is correct, then information doesn't vanish when it enters a black hole. It gets stored on the surface and may be recoverable in some form. That would solve the information problem and preserve the rules of quantum mechanics. It also means that volume might not be the best way to think about how much information a region of space can hold. If the data is really on the surface, then larger volumes don't necessarily carry more information. The rules of space become more about boundaries than insides. The holographic principle is still a theory. It has not been proven for our universe, but it's supported by strong math and shows up in places where quantum theory and gravity overlap. Scientists keep exploring it not because they want it to be true, but because it may explain things that other ideas cannot. It gives a way to talk about the deep structure of space, time, and matter, using information as the foundation. Whether or not it describes the world you touch, it offers a sharp question. What if everything you see is only part of the picture, and the real story is written on the edge? You turn on an old video and see a man in a bulky white suit stepping onto a dusty gray surface. His foot lands, and he says it's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. That was in 1969. Neil Armstrong walked on the moon while hundreds of millions of people watched from Earth. Or at least, that's what we've been told. Some people say it didn't happen. They believe the moon landing was faked, filmed on Earth in a studio, and broadcast to fool the world. This belief is called the moon landing hoax theory. It claims the United States staged the moon missions, especially Apollo 11, to make it look like they had beaten the Soviet Union in the space race. Supporters of this theory think the government had reasons to lie. They say NASA couldn't pull off the landing with the technology available at the time, and faking it would be cheaper, safer, and better for national pride. The theory started gaining traction in the 1970s. One of the main voices was a man named Bill Kaysing. He had worked as a technical writer for a company that helped build rocket engines. He wasn't a rocket scientist, but he said he had inside knowledge. In 1974, he self-published a book claiming the moon landing was a hoax. He pointed to things he saw as problems or mistakes in the official footage and photos. Others picked up on his claims and began spreading them. One argument hoax supporters use is the lack of stars in the moon landing photos. The sky is black, they say, so where are the stars? They claim NASA left them out because it was too hard to place them accurately on a fake backdrop. But this argument leaves out how cameras work. The astronauts were standing in bright sunlight. To take pictures without overexposing the scene, the camera settings had to limit light. That made stars too dim to appear in the photos. If you take a photo of a well-lit street at night, you often don't see stars either. That doesn't mean the photo was faked. It means the stars were too faint for the camera to catch with those settings. Another claim focuses on the American flag. In the videos, the flag appears to ripple or wave. People say this means wind must be blowing, which would only happen in Earth's atmosphere, not on the moon. But the flag didn't move because of wind. It moved because of momentum. The astronauts twisted the flagpole to get it into place. That motion caused the flag to swing, and since there's no air on the moon to slow it down, it kept moving for longer than it would on Earth. NASA also used a horizontal rod to hold the flag out, so it didn't hang limp. That rod made the flag look like it was flapping, even when it wasn't. Supporters of the hoax theory also point to shadows. They say some shadows in the photos don't run in parallel lines, as they should if the sun is the only light source. This, they claim, proves studio lighting was used. But shadows behave differently on uneven surfaces. On the moon, the ground is hilly and bumpy. If a shadow falls across a slope or dips into a crater, it bends. You can test this on Earth by shining a flashlight over rough ground. The shadows curve and stretch depending on the terrain. You don't need stage lights for that to happen. Another common point is that the astronauts should have been killed by radiation. Between Earth and the Moon is a region called the Van Allen belts. These are zones of charged particles trapped by Earth's magnetic field. Hoax believers say this radiation would have fried the astronauts. But NASA knew about the belts and planned the trip to limit exposure. The spacecraft passed through quickly, and the astronauts received only a small dose, less than what some medical imaging procedures give today. The risk was there, but it was managed. Some go further and say the rockets never left Earth. They argue that the launch was real, but the spacecraft went into low Earth orbit and never traveled to the Moon. According to this idea, the rest of the mission was staged. But that leaves a big problem. Where did the rocket go? Thousands of people watched the Saturn V lift off. Tracking stations followed it across space. Amateur radio operators picked up transmissions. Scientists in other countries, including rivals like the Soviet Union, monitored the flights. None of them raised concerns at the time. If the US had faked it, its enemies would have exposed the lie. There's also the issue of complexity. The moon landings involved more than just a few astronauts and government workers. Tens of thousands of engineers, scientists, and contractors were part of the Apollo program. They worked on rockets, guidance systems, computers, and more. To fake the landing, you would need all of them to lie or stay silent, not just for a few years, but for decades. That kind of secrecy is hard to believe. Even small conspiracies tend to leak. A secret involving that many people would be almost impossible to keep. Some hoax claims come from misunderstandings of how space works. People say the photos look too good, like they were taken by professionals. But the astronauts were trained in photography. The cameras were specially designed to work in the harsh conditions of the moon. And many photos did not turn out well. NASA only released the best ones, just like anyone would. Others say the film would have melted in the heat. But the cameras were shielded, and the temperature depends on where the sun is. In space, objects can get very hot or very cold, depending on whether they are in sunlight or shadow. NASA planned for that. They tested equipment and materials under those conditions before the missions. One more claim is that filmmaker Stanley Kubrick helped fake the moon landing. People say he had the skill to create realistic footage and that his movie 2001: A Space Odyssey was a test run. But there's no real evidence for this. It's based on rumors, jokes, and out-of-context interviews. Kubrick's family and colleagues deny he had any connection to NASA. The timeline doesn't even fit. His movie came out before the moon landing, not after. Despite the problems with these claims, the theory persists. Some people find it easier to believe the moon landing was staged than to accept that humans traveled to another world using mid-20th century technology. The hoax theory also appeals to a sense of doubt. It says, question everything, which can be a healthy instinct. But questioning needs to be balanced with evidence. If every expert, every document, every piece of physical proof is dismissed as fake, then no amount of explanation will change the mind who has already decided not to believe. The moon landing hoax theory isn't based on a single piece of strong evidence. It's a collection of misunderstandings, coincidences, and mistrust. It keeps going because it feeds on suspicion. But when you examine each claim step by step with clear facts and simple tests, the story of a fake moon landing falls apart. What remains is a record of human effort, flawed, complex, but real. The kind of thing you expect from people doing something no one had ever done before. You open your eyes and see light. You hear a voice. You taste coffee. You feel warmth on your skin. These are not just signals in the brain. They are experiences. You don't just process information. You feel it. That is what makes consciousness so strange. We can describe how the brain processes data, but we can't fully explain why it feels like something to be alive, to be you. That's what philosophers and scientists call the hard problem of consciousness. The phrase hard problem was made popular by philosopher David Chalmers in the 1990s. He pointed out that we can explain many parts of the brain in physical terms. We can study how the eyes capture light, how neurons fire, how the brain stores memories, and how muscles move. These are real problems, but they are easy in comparison. They involve figuring out how the machine works. The hard problem is not about function, it's about experience. Why does any of it feel like anything at all? Think of a computer. It can take in images, store data, and follow instructions. It can even mimic conversation or recognize faces, but there is no reason to believe the computer is having any experience. It's not aware of what it's doing. It doesn't feel joy or pain. You can turn it off and it doesn't care. A computer might process a picture of a sunset, but it doesn't see it the way you do. You feel the color, the glow, the emotion. That feeling is called qualia, individual moments of experience. The redness of red, the sharpness of a pinprick, the softness of music. No amount of code explains why these things feel the way they do. Brains are different from computers in structure and biology, but they also take in signals, process information, and guide action. You can trace a reaction from your eye to your brain's visual cortex. You can track brain activity that matches a thought. But even when you map the whole process, you don't touch the experience itself. You explain the function, but not the feeling. Imagine a robot designed to say ouch when poked. It has sensors and programmed responses. It sounds like it feels pain, but it doesn't. Now imagine a person saying ouch after stubbing a toe. You believe they feel pain because you felt pain. There's something it's like to be in that moment. That inner part, the what it's like, is what the hard problem focuses on. It's not about behavior. It's about why any system should have a point of view at all. Some people argue that consciousness is just an illusion. They say the brain creates the sense of being a self, and that sense is not real. But this raises a problem. Even if the self is a kind of trick, the trick is still being experienced. There's still something having the illusion. You can't explain experience by saying it doesn't exist, because you still experience saying that. Denying consciousness requires consciousness. Others believe consciousness is an emergent property. That means it arises when systems get complex enough. Just like wetness comes from water molecules moving together, awareness might come from neurons firing in the right way. But again, that explains function, not feeling. We know a lot about neurons. We know how they fire, how they connect, how they pass signals, but none of that tells us why it feels like something to be a person, instead of just being a body reacting to the world. The brain is made of cells, which are made of atoms. Atoms are not conscious, neither are molecules or proteins. If you add them up, layer by layer, when does experience appear? At what point does a collection of matter start to feel something? That jump from no experience to experience is the mystery. It's not clear how it happens, or even if our tools can measure it. Let's say we build a perfect model of the brain. Every connection, every impulse, every signal is matched. The model behaves exactly like a person. It says it's sad when you say something mean. It says it's happy when you give it praise. Does it feel sadness or happiness? Or is it just copying the behavior? You can't open a machine and find an experience inside. You can only guess based on behavior. But behavior doesn't prove anything about inner life. This is why some philosophers say consciousness may not be physical in the usual sense. They suggest it could be a basic part of reality, like space or time. Maybe experience is something the universe does, not just something brains do. This view is called panpsychism. It says that everything might have some tiny level of consciousness. A rock doesn't think, but it might have a very basic form of awareness. Most scientists don't accept this idea, but it shows how far people are willing to go to explain what feels unexplainable. Another theory is that consciousness depends on information being integrated. That is, when the brain pulls together data from different senses, sight, sound, touch, and combines it into a single unified whole, that process produces experience. This is called integrated information theory. It gives a possible way to measure consciousness. If a system has a high level of integration, it might be conscious. But this still doesn't say why integration feels like something. It gives a score, not an answer. We also don't know how to test for consciousness in non-human animals. We assume a dog feels pain. We believe a chimpanzee has emotions. But what about an octopus? A mouse? A fly? What about artificial systems? If we train a machine to act like a person, does that mean it is a person? Does it have rights? These questions matter because how we treat others depends on what we believe they can feel. There are medical puzzles too. Patients under anesthesia seem to lose consciousness, but some report memories after waking up. Others enter a coma, but later describe vivid experiences. The line between being conscious and unconscious is not always clear, and we don't know what causes it. Is it a certain brain pattern, a level of activity, a type of signal? We can measure brain waves, but they don't explain the why. You also have split brain cases, patients whose brain hemispheres were separated to treat epilepsy. Some of these patients behave like two different minds in one body. One hand does one thing, the other hand does something else. One side sees a word and acts on it, the other doesn't. Does this mean each side has its own consciousness? If so, where is the boundary? And if we can split a mind, can we combine minds? What holds consciousness together? These are the kinds of questions the hard problem raises. It doesn't ask how we react to a sound. It asks why the sound feels like anything at all. You hear a bell and feel something. That feeling doesn't help your muscles or improve your survival. It's just there. It's the core of being alive. You think, I am. That's the thing we don't understand. No scan or test tells us what it's like to be someone else. We don't know how red feels to a bat or how music feels to a bird. We can map behavior, we can track brain signals, but we still can't explain why anything has a view from the inside. That is the hard problem of consciousness, not just how the brain works, but why it works with feeling. You sit at a bus stop and notice someone nearby. They wear clothes that don't quite match the season. Their phone looks strange, or maybe they have no phone at all. They stare at things like they're seeing them for the first time. Some people look at scenes like this and wonder, could that person be a time traveler? The idea that time travelers might already be among us is more than just a plot for movies. Some people believe it's happening now. They think time travel isn't just possible, it's real, and that someone, somewhere, is already using the technology. Time travel means moving from one point in time to another. We all move through time at the same basic rate, 1 second per second, from past to future. But the concept of jumping across years, skipping centuries, or visiting the past is something different. In science, time travel is not ruled out completely. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, time moves at different speeds depending on how fast you go and how close you are to strong gravity. For example, astronauts on the International Space Station age slightly slower than people on Earth. This effect is tiny, but it's real. That's called time dilation. It shows that time is not fixed. It can stretch and bend. This leads to a question. If time can move at different rates, could we use that fact to travel through it? Physicists have suggested that under very special conditions, using wormholes or near light speed travel, time loops or jumps might be possible. These ideas depend on technology and energy levels far beyond what we have now. But they don't break the known laws of physics. That gives people room to imagine. What if someone has already built such a machine? Some claims come from people who say they've done it themselves. In the early 2000s, a man calling himself John Titor appeared on internet forums. He claimed to be from the year 2036. He said he was a soldier sent back in time to retrieve an old computer. He described his mission, shared details about future events, and even posted diagrams of his time machine. Many of his predictions didn't come true, but some people still believe his story. They say his goal was not to predict the future, but to warn people, or that his arrival changed the timeline. That idea, that events can shift when a traveler enters the past, is common in these stories. It suggests that history is flexible. A small action by a time traveler could create new paths. If that's true, then maybe we don't notice time travelers because they've already changed the past. We live in the version of history they helped shape. Other people point to strange photographs or videos. In one famous example, a man appears in a 1940s photo wearing what looks like modern sunglasses and a printed t-shirt. Some say the photo shows a time traveler caught on camera. Others say the clothes were possible at the time, just unusual. These photos often go viral, but most can be explained with research or context. Still, the idea sticks. People want to believe that someone has slipped through time and left a trace. There are also stories about people who seem to vanish or appear without explanation. Some describe travelers who know things they shouldn't. A few claim to have met someone who spoke of future disasters before they happened. These stories are hard to verify, but they keep coming, often in patterns. The travelers appear for a short time, say or do something strange, then disappear. Some believers think governments are hiding time travel technology. They point to secret research programs and military projects. If time travel were real, they argue, it would be too powerful to share with the public. It would give control over information, power, and history. That kind of tool would likely be kept secret. People who support this view often bring up old experiments like the Philadelphia experiment, where the US Navy was said to have made a ship disappear. There's no proof it happened, but the story feeds the belief that time-related experiments have been done in secret. There's also a belief that time travelers avoid being noticed. If someone can travel through time, they might also know how to blend in. They wouldn't draw attention. They wouldn't brag or make mistakes. They might study a time period like a scientist studies animals in the wild, quietly and from a distance. That means a time traveler could sit next to you on a train or walk past you on a busy street, and you'd never know. Some stories flip the idea. They say time travelers make themselves known on purpose. They might be here to prevent a disaster or guide society in some way. This version treats time travelers like guardians, people with knowledge of future events who use that knowledge to steer us away from harm. It assumes a kind of ethics behind time travel. The traveler doesn't just observe, they act, but only when needed. In some cases, people claim to be time travelers under stress. They appear in police stations or hospitals, confused about where or when they are. In one famous case from the 1950s, a man arrived in Tokyo with documents from a country that didn't exist. He spoke several languages and said he was on a business trip. He was detained and later vanished from a locked room. The story has many versions and no solid proof, but it keeps resurfacing. Supporters say it shows how a person can slip through worlds. Skeptics say it's just a mix-up or a myth. Time travel stories often reveal more about human psychology than physics. They show how people think about regret, destiny, and curiosity. The idea that someone could fix the past or explore the future speaks to deep feelings about control and knowledge. Some people say they don't want to know what's coming. Others say they jump at the chance to see it. Both views come from the same place, the desire to understand time, to escape its limits. In science, the idea of closed time-like curves, loops in space-time, is still debated. They allow the math of time travel without breaking the rules. But these curves depend on exotic matter and conditions we don't know how to create. That keeps the door open, but only a crack. Most scientists say time travel to the past, if possible at all, would require technology that may never exist. That hasn't stopped the stories. Whether it's someone who wakes up in a different decade, a photograph that shows a person out of place, or a claim from a visitor from the year 2100, people continue to tell these tales. Each story asks a simple question. What if time isn't fixed? What if someone has already stepped out of their own century and into ours? These beliefs may not have hard proof, but they offer something else, a frame for wonder. They ask you to look at the world and see more than the present. They treat time as something you can walk through, like a forest or a hallway. And they suggest that maybe, just maybe, someone is already doing it.